Hey there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Co-Op Syndicate. I'm your co-host, Michael C. Moore.
I'm your other co-host, Jordan G. Marcos.
And today we're going to be talking about the dark side of gaming, or one of the many dark aspects that gaming could have, which is video game addiction. Now, of course, we don't want the episode to be like super negative and stuff, so we're going to be looking at, both the positive sides of gaming and the negative sides as well. But we do want to be realistic, even though we're gamers. We do realize that everything in excess can be bad, including gaming, and we're going to be discussing that largely today. We kind of decided to go with a more natural approach for this episode. We're just trying to keep it more conversational. We're also trying a different setup, which hopefully can help how we have a conversation and the way that we actually have the audio set up as well. We're trying to go for a different feel for the podcast now, where before, to get the audio good, we would have to mute each other's mics and kind of wait turns. We kind of want to let the conversation flow a little bit better, and that might include interrupting each other and stuff, or maybe occasionally have moments where we talk at the same time. And I think that sitting the way we are now is going to allow us to do that. Jordan, real quick, can you do me a favor? Could you actually right click on my camera? Actually, I'll do it myself. Give me 1 second, guys.
No problem, man. In regards to the comment, like the topic today, like I said, like I was telling Mike before, I didn't really think much of this topic other than, some of the personal issues I've had myself as a person. So I'm gonna let Mike mostly guide us today with the topic. But as far as that, I do have a couple stories I want to sell and some things I just want to get off my chest, because it's just like hearing this type of stuff really grinds my gears, especially nowadays. But aside from that, I mean, gaming tour, or I guess we're really talking about like the bitter reality, right, of gaming. And I mean, there sometimes people see it, or like people will easily say, oh, a gamer is like addicted and all they're doing is just playing games and they don't really care about anything. But the honest answer is, like, a lot of times we have to see a lot deeper into it. For example, I know for myself, the gaming is a coping mechanism. I use it a lot to get rid of my stress, and especially when I'm beyond emaciated with stress and I just can't deal with what's going on in life, my normal bodily reaction is to just go play video games, because it's the only way I can internalize, or be able. Not internalizing is a bad way to say it. I mean, what I'm trying to say is it's the only way I can really like hone in on my emotions and kind of settle down so I can think them through. And I mean, gaming for me is great because it distracts me from some of the pains I would normally have in terms of depression and anxiety, and it would kind of bring me down to a meditative state where I can kind of work through the emotions that I'm feeling at the moment, which allows me to really figure out what it is that's wrong. It lets me think on whether I'm sad or upset, or maybe did I go too far on a type of comment I did with somebody. There's many different ways to go about it, but it's just the way I connect with gaming in general. And I think that's pretty much what I personally want to cover today, to correct maybe some things that maybe were perceived incorrect.
Yeah, I think that that's a pretty good take on that, personally. I don't know. I mean, here's the thing, right? When you're talking about addiction, I think this is something that especially maybe like the media and people who might stand to benefit in some sort of weird way of making certain things bigger than they are, with outrage and stuff. I think it's not always necessarily that someone who enjoys gaming a lot and maybe does it excessively has an addiction. I think that the best way that you could define addiction is kind of when you feel a compulsion to do something, and let's say you'd have a hard time wanting to stop, like you'd have a hard time not doing it even if you really want to, or it's starting to have negative effects in your personal life, I guess. Which I think there has been instances that I've kind of had that going, but I don't like if those were instances of video game addiction, I don't think it's ever been like compulsive or chronic to the point where like my life has fallen apart because of gaming or anything like that. So I guess before we get into that, I kind of want to talk about some of the positive things that gaming has done, because, obviously me and Jordan are both avid gamers, maybe Jordan even more so than I. But I want to talk about the things that I think doing gaming as a hobby, how it's been. I want to talk about how it's been beneficial for me first and foremost before I go and start dinging it for anything, and then we kind of talk about some of the side effects of it, going poorly or kind of turning sideways. So personally, I've always played video games from the time that I was very young, from the time I was a little boy. I remember my earliest memories. Like the first video game I remember playing was Ocarina of Time on the Nintendo 64. It was the very first video game I actually have memory of in my mind of playing, and I just remember falling in love with that as a hobby immediately. Like most of the kids that liked watching TV, cartoons, movies, and all that, but I think gaming stood out especially for me because while watching a cartoon or watching a movie is something that you could kind of enjoy an adventure for, just in the terms of observing it as a spectacle, gaming takes that sense of adventure one step forward, in my opinion, in the sense that you what I mean by that is that now you're becoming an included part of the adventure, right? Like, in a movie, it could immerse you and you could feel very strong emotions because of it and very strong feelings, but having control over a character in that adventure for some reason just gives it that an extra like punch or an extra connection that is just missing from movies and shows in general, especially because while there's some things you can't really control, like maybe where the narrative turns, like in a more traditional narrative anyway, like, if as long as there's not like branching storylines and all that, the fact that you're actually just along for all the minute details of the journey and that you can actually control those aspects of it really solidifies that for me. And so, I guess just to start naming off some of the ways that's actually been a positive thing for me, escapism, I think is a big thing. A lot of the times, life, everyone, has a background, and it feels like, many days people have sob stories. I'm not trying to like say that in a negative kind of way. It's just, life has positive aspects and negative aspects, just like how video games do, right? And everyone has gone through suffering to some extent in their life, and I think that video games for me has been a big help in coping with some of the negativity in my life. I'm not saying I have more or less than anybody who might be listening or watching, but from a very early age, I started experiencing some pretty negative things, like some anxiety with going to school ever since elementary school. I did make friends easily within like the kindergarten and first grade, or that would be first year, second year for our friends that might be listening over in the UK or Europe. But afterwards, it kind of fell off. I'm not quite sure why. I had a harder time interacting with people. I was kind of like the weird kid in class. I didn't make as many friends, and I don't know. I started to develop a little bit of social anxiety. So along with other anxieties of just going to school and stuff and trying to perform in school, and then other personal things in my life that were kind of not so great, gaming was just a great way to not only pass the time, but to soothe some of that, instead of, sitting down for hours staring at a wall and wondering why I was a weird kid and why I didn't have that many friends and all that. I could just go ahead and pick up a game and, you know what? I want to play this game today. Let's see what's in store with this adventure. Even though it sounds stupid, I told you that was the first game I played. Ocarina of Time actually managed to hold me down forever because as a kid, I wasn't smart enough to even figure out how to get past the forest temple, which had that super weird puzzle I showed you.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, for some reason, just to go off on a tangent real quick, everyone who I've personally showed Ocarina of Time to has never finished the forest temple by themselves. If you guys have done that, like, let us know in the comments down below, because I need to know how many people the forest temple duped, and it just wasn't me, because this was kind of like before the internet was really like super used and popular to just figure out video game stuff. I could never finish that forest temple. I showed Jordan the game; he couldn't really either. I don't know if you remember that. Like, you were there.
I was going to figure it out eventually, obviously, because I'm the kind of person that likes to try and figure out stuff before. I mean, maybe back then when I actually did play it, it probably wasn't the right time for me. Like lately, I've just been like, no, I got to figure it out on my own. But beforehand, or like back in the day, I was actually like very quick to give up and would probably ended up on the internet. But it wasn't even that. I was also at a friend's house, like somebody that had already beaten the game, and then he was just annoyed watching me play it, so he just remembered the puzzle and did it for me.
Wait, so he did it for you?
Yeah, he did it
that
for
I
me.
showed you.
No, he did it for me, and then I just eventually went on to the rest of the game. And then the other time I got duped in that game, or like just completely like lost, was the desert. When you were getting to the desert temple, you had to go between as a kid versus an adult. I never figured out the right sequence I had to do it in order to enter the temple, and then somebody else did it for me, but I wasn't looking. So luckily, I still don't know how to solve it. And if I ever do go back to play the game, I'll have the joy of figuring that one out. But the forest temple's engraved in my mind for the rest of my life. It's unfortunate. It's the ones you can't figure out that people figure out for you are the ones that you like forever remember, and then the ones that you figure out for yourself are like, oh, this is meaningless to me, and you just forget it.
Yeah, that's really bad. I know. It's like when you're trying to avoid like a bad spoiler and it ends up just getting thrown in your face, and as hard as you can, you just can't seem to forget it.
Yeah.
Which, maybe we might talk about like psychology and therapy and stuff afterwards, but just to write in on a quick conversational note with that. Funnily enough, with the passing of my grandmother earlier this year, I think I've had a little bit of a traumatic experience. I wouldn't go as far as to say that I have like PTSD or anything like that, but I did have, and sometimes continue to have invasive thoughts about her final moments. And I talked to my therapist about that, and she actually just straight away told me that there is no way to really remove a thought like out of your brain. What she did tell me was that, I mean, like, there's a method that you could kind of use to maybe help yourself get to that, but it's not like 100% perfect. Essentially, what that looks like is that you, any single time you start to have that thought come into your brain, you immediately think of something else. So I don't know. Let's say if you're like, oh, Forest Temple, you solve it in this specific way, just automatically think, oh wait, I don't know it, or think like, oh, another spoiler. Just instantly think about something else, and then maybe you can kind of trick your brain into doing it. But I don't know if it's like super concrete to the fact that like you'll just forget it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I don't want to think about those last moments, but if I let my brain go that direction, even with as much misdirection as I provide it, it'll still come up. So
no, yeah, there's no way to get rid of it. I mean, I to this day, it's still engraved in my mind how to solve the final puzzle of the co-op campaign of Portal 2, because of how awesome that moment was when we both, figured it out. And I was like, oh, Eureka, this is how you do it. And then since that day, like 10 years ago, I still cannot, for the life of me, figure out how to, forget that, because it's just, I remember it. And then it's like, if I go back to the game, I'm going to spend the entire game doing all these puzzles. And then the big puzzle, the one where I'm supposed to like finally, wow, have the impact of it, it's just gone,
Yeah.
But I mean, those are the fond memories too. And those fond memories help me out with my own depression. I know you're mentioning, you just said you still have invasive memories on your grandmother, rest in peace, but I mean, it's also fairly recent. Like, it's only been a few months. Like,
the way you said "rest in peace," like I thought, I personally, the way I would have chosen to say it is like "may she rest in peace," but then you're just like "rest in peace." So it kind of reminded me of like this video where like the guy's like, "Yo, my grandma died," like rip, whatever. Like you almost throw it up like
it's just the gamer terminology. That's just in me. It's not.
No, I know.
But
I appreciate you saying that though.
No, but
thank you.
But for real, it's like, it's been fairly recent, so it's totally understandable that you'd feel down. Like, I know that some things, when it happens recently to me, like something that's recent, it affects me for a long time, and then it'll escape me. But then, like a couple years later, it'll just start hitting me again. Like, I know, getting fired was pretty traumatic for me, and then for a while it didn't affect me for a few months, but then after like the 6th or 7th month, it just started hitting me again. And then just yesterday we were having that conversation, and just the mere thought of like reliving all the memories at that previous job, like, it still hurts me to this day.
Yeah, I remember, we were actually, we had finished our podcast yesterday with Sergio over at SR Shotolongo. You guys should check out his channel in case you want to see like whenever we were featured on there, or if you just want to check him out for his content. He's a pretty cool guy. But, we had finished that, and Jordan was driving me back home because since we kind of live on the way there from each other, he just scooped me up, and then we went to go see Sergio. We had gone to grab some food as he was going to drop me off, and we just carpooled. And we started talking about that, and then Jordan started making a lot of errors with driving, and then like ordering his food at the drive-through. When we started bringing up all the memories of our old places of employment, and talking about getting laid off and all that, so I could see that there was actual like physical signs of discomfort in you when that was occurring.
Yeah.
But I guess to get back to the topic of how the gaming feels kind of positive, you know, people go through stuff like what we were talking about at the moment. You know, like relatives pass. Everyone, you know, goes away at some point or another, and you know, surely, I mean, I bet there's some people that have never been laid off, but a grand majority of people at some point have been laid off, as you know, the changes of businesses need, or as technology evolves and certain positions become irrelevant and stuff. The majority of people have experience of firing in one form or another and stuff, and those are things that could have a deep impact into your like psychology and on your brain and on your self-esteem and stuff like that. And also, you know, same thing when you're in school, the way that you know, the way that you, the experiences that you have with your peers, how people treat you if you're bullied and stuff like that all has an impact on you, in my opinion. So, you know, namely, I've gone through a bunch of problems in my childhood, as many other people have. And I always found that the greatest way, or one of the greatest things to do, is always just any form of escapism. You know, for some people, it's reading books. For some people, it might be doing a sport. I did my fair share of things. You know, I at some point I experimented with drawing and animation, stuff like that. But you know, something that has just always seemed to somehow just stick with me is just gaming, and it's something that's magical about it. I don't know if you want to chime in, but it's just the aspect of like creating a universe that you get to be a part of and actually control things, and it doesn't have to be in a realistic setting per se. Like, it could just be, you know, oh, you want to be a part of Star Wars, go play a Star Wars video game, and now you're a Jedi yourself and stuff. Or you know, if you want to do an RPG and you want to be a wizard, now you're a wizard. Or, you know, you could choose to do whatever you want. You want to be a soldier, go play Call of Duty.
I mean, I think the biggest thing you're going off on there is the fact that you as a person get to control it, whereas a lot of things in life, like, you can't really control it. And life, like, especially when dealing with other people, like, you can't just control other people. You have to be mindful of how they feel, how they might react to what you say and stuff. So in gaming, it's easier because it's just inanimate. Like, you're animating it by going through the game, right? I mean, sure, animation in its own definition is that, you know, characters are moved and all that stuff, but the game doesn't start unless you press start, and the game doesn't continue unless you move forward or press the interaction button, right? So the concept of you being in control and just being able to move at your own pace when you need to, and doing the activities that you like the most, is, I think, the big thing there for the escapism that really helps. I mean, people could say games are bad because we have games like Last of Us Part 2 that are extremely violent or political or whatever. That's regardless, because a game like Last of Us Part 2 reaches probably 20 to 30 million players concurrent, and then, you know, there's several people that watch the walkthroughs. But then you look at Minecraft, which has nothing to do with anything other than you just being creative and free, and it has over like 80 million people playing it, right? So honestly, like, games, there's different types of experiences you can go for in gaming because of the way it resonates, and especially when the game is good, like, it really hits home. I know when I was depressed, a lot of times I would do cool things, you know, like helping out people on raids and stuff, just trying to make people feel good, like help them out with getting their activity, despite the fact that I would have already gotten the rewards for the week, right? Talking about Destiny, you can only get the rewards once a week per character. I would do that and then go help like 10 other people, because it just felt, here's Aggie, the cat, just getting in the shot here, just like, hug me.
Yeah, but, for everyone, just so that everyone knows, that's my cat Aggie. Since we record this at my house, sometimes my pets will just get into the frame, and for some reason my pets all have some sort of weird infatuation with Jordan, so excuse them if they ever, you know, they feel
the emotional stress, and they're like, I'm here for you.
Yeah, I think so. It seems like a lot of times whenever if we ever have a serious you know, conversation, it seems like my pets just turn up to comfort us, and I guess also be comforted. But yeah, I guess I'll hop in since you got interrupted.
No, I mean, I could finish my thought. Basically, like, I would go around and helping out like 10 different people, despite the fact that I already completed my rewards for the week, because the game was just that fun. It was that fun to interact with someone and just feel that they feel good, you know, and then you feel good because you help them feel good. And I literally got nothing off of it. Those people didn't talk to me again. They were just random people on the forums and stuff that I'd pick up. And
Wait, you're saying that you used gaming as a method to make friends via like gaming forums and
no,
stuff
no,
like
I'm
that?
saying I didn't. They weren't friends of mine, and they didn't come back to play with me the following week. But it just felt good to do that, to make them happy that I helped them complete the raid or an activity or something. And in turn, it made me feel good because I was making somebody else feel good, even if it's just superficial. Which I obviously carried forward, as you saw when I started working in Office Depot. Like, my biggest joy of working there was helping out people until everything went sideways, and then the companies being companies is like, no, give me stuff or you're fired. And then you have to work differently and more aggressively. But when I first started, like, the concept of me teaching somebody the difference between like several antiviruses and just helping them get the right purchase, like, it carried forward. But in games I have that, and then of course I have my own solo moments where, like, I like going through the story. Like, I know before Destiny and all that stuff, like, one way I would get rid of my depression is I would just literally swallow an entire anime like in one shot. Like, I would just binge watch it pretty much. And Great Teacher Onizuka was one of those where I was depressed, but like, the show was so good. It's about like this teacher who tries to help out his delinquent students become better and stuff. And it's kind of like Stand and Deliver, but the anime instead. And I resonated with that anime because of that. And then again, a game like God of War recently, where like watching the joy of Kratos, who I used to enjoy as like this Hulkbuster, all of a sudden start being a father and change his emotions. Like, all that resonated with me, thus making me feel better at the moment. So there's a lot of ways that games can make somebody feel better. And there's a fine line between the addiction, because there's also the way that it could be an addiction. But people have to really realize what it is, especially when observing somebody, before labeling, because you don't want to label somebody and then trick them into thinking that about themselves, and then they actually do end up becoming that, but they weren't, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess before we hop into that though, I want to keep just talking about like the different ways that I think it's how gaming is a positive influence. And the note that we kind of were talking about there and stringing up earlier was I think the escapism aspect of it, where like no matter what you're going through in life, I think there could be healthy ways to deal with something and kind of negative ways to deal with something. And maybe some things of dealing with things would be okay as long as you don't take it to an extreme. That's kind of the truth with everything though, right? Like, even if you look at mundane things like drinking water is fantastic for you, and it's an amazing thing. But if you take it to an extreme, you could actually get waterlogged or quote unquote water poisoning, and you have to go to the hospital and you could die from that. Or if you if you breathe too much, you could over oxygenate your blood cells, and that could shorten your lifespan. Or you could get dizzy if you breathe too fast, and oxygen can get you high if it's like you're breathing it too directly and it's too pure and all that. So it's just literally what I'm trying to say is that anything taken to excess is a bad thing, but in moderation, literally most things are actually beneficial, unless it's just something that's straight out toxic or poisonous to you, like poison or venom or things of that nature. So if as long as you're able to actively participate in something without it having an immediate adverse health effect, doing it in moderation could actually be a benefit to you. Even drinking wine and stuff like that, even though if you drink too much, it can kill your brain cells, it's bad for your liver. Scientists say it's good for your heart and stuff, right? So
yeah, I totally agree with that. So.
Yeah, so gaming's very much the same way. If you're going through something crappy, and you might want to numb the pain, maybe you're going through a divorce or something like that, or the end of a bad relationship, you're getting bullied in school. Obviously, these are things that you want to come to a meaningful you want to find a meaningful solution to it, or meaningful conclusion to you, so you could kind of move on or get help in the situation. But if you're ever struggling, and maybe the pain's just too much, so you have a choice to make on what you're going to do about that. Ultimately, if someone's if the suffering for somebody just happens to be too much, the ultimatum that some people might look at is just ending their own life if they can't deal with something. And obviously that's the least constructive way that somebody could ever deal with a trauma or a really big issue. And that should never be done, period. If you're ever struggling with it, please, like with something like that, like please call like a hotline for help. You definitely shouldn't do that. But If you don't take it to that extreme, then there's a question of, okay, obviously you want to keep staking around, but the pain's just so bad. What are you going to do? You could go ahead and start exercising. You could go ahead and play some video games. You could start binge watching some shows, right? And that's acceptable as long as you're not letting your life fall out of place, right? With these methods that you're using to cope. And video games is kind of one of those that falls into it. But then obviously there's more harmful ones where maybe you don't have to do it for that long, and all of a sudden there is something that's immediately damaging to you, like maybe you end up having like a drinking too much one day or something, which could actually be immediately dangerous to your health. Or perhaps you can actually you might try like a hardcore drug, and obviously there is already risky because you're introducing the element of like a physiological addiction where it's not even like you entered into your system and now your brain's just automatically asking you to get more. It's not even one of those dependency issues, is that you will literally be in physical pain from withdrawals and stuff for you not taking this drug anymore. So that's kind of the question that I'm looking at in terms of escapism, is that obviously you don't want to live in escapism because it will result in your life falling apart around you. Because I think like anything else, your life's going to require maintenance for it to stay okay. If you are going through a rough situation, the window is there for you to just take a couple of hours every day and step into an alternate universe where you can just enjoy things or have more control over your environment. And it's in a healthier way than some other solutions. Now, personally, I do recommend mixing things. So, for a while, I was pretty fit and I was doing a lot of exercise. And at the same time, I was playing games too. So, consider mixing it up, because that way it's going to have only even more benefits for you, more time away from the pain. And you have the physical benefits of exercising. And there's actually like psychological and mental like benefits from exercising as well. And then you also get the enjoyment of playing a game for a couple of hours a day too. So the more you mix it up and the more health benefits are available, the better. But like I said, as long as you don't take it to an extreme, gaming could actually be really, really beneficial in that sense.
Yeah, I mean that's all stuff that has to be taken into consideration, especially for a person, because a lot of times too, like, and with dealing with the problems we're covering today, like anxiety and depression, all that stuff. I know for myself, whenever I start feeling really bad, despite the fact that I know I could just go walk or something, it's just my body just doesn't want to leave to do any of that. And it's just that's the type of stuff that we, like, people like me has to deal with all the time when they have depression and all those feelings, where it's like the health is there for us and we can literally get up and get it, but our bodies just don't see it that way. I know I used to walk a lot too when I was losing weight and trying to get, not necessarily fit, but I was trying to seek a more healthy lifestyle. Doing weights, but not going to like bodybuilder weights, like just, doing weights that I feel like I'm somewhat like capable of doing stuff. That to me, like nowadays today, like I don't feel that way, despite the fact that I know it. I know that I shouldn't be eating Wendy's and McDonald's and all that stuff all the time, but it's just the food makes me, it satisfies me for the moment because it just completes, what I'm feeling and like takes it off for a minute or two. And I guess that's the big thing about the depression and anxiety and all these things that make people feel different ways. Like we forget that there's help around this. That's why I have my own personal psychologist I'm going to now and trying to, I mean, it's pretty early. We still haven't had too many sessions, but we're starting to slowly crack down on things that affect me personally. And that's something that people have to worry about, because again, it leads into all the problems that you're talking about. When you go too much into something, it leads into something else, and then it becomes a problem.
Well, but I'm a little confused because you mentioned you were kind of all over the place when you were talking about like some of the methods you have of coping and stuff. So I kind of want you to elaborate a little bit more on that.
I wasn't saying coping. I was just trying to explain that a lot of times, like people who become depressed, they fall into this notion where it's like it's too hard to do anything. For example, like for myself, sometimes
you're kind of saying like walking at times would be too big
like
of an
I know
ask for
walking would be good because it lets you breathe in, and I've mentioned it to you before. Hey, look, when you get a chance, just take a walk. You could just breathe in, and then you breathe out, and you process your thoughts and just really try to zero out, right? But despite the fact it's like it's too hard for me to get up and do that, right? But then I have the games which are there, which I could just turn on, lay back, and then just get lost. It's not outside my room, so it's easy to grab. But even then, sometimes I've had moments like this past week where I'm literally just like I could get on my PS5 and play something, or I could get on my PS3 and play some of the games I wanted to play. But it's just the concept of me, oh man, having to sit down and I have to think about the mechanics of the game and get involved. That concept to me can sometimes become too tiring as well, and I just end up watching Netflix or just staring at my phone on Twitter, because it's just me like thinking about doing something that might cost energy can make me feel really bad, and then my body shuts down and I don't want to do it. And that's what I'm trying to say. It's like a lot of times we have to find a way to our best to distinguish, like, what it is. For example, I know I feel good when I come on and do this podcast, so it's a benefit to me, and that's something I don't want to give up. But this morning, I didn't feel that way. This morning when I woke up, I was like, oh man, I have to get up and drive over to his house. And it's like the more I thought about doing it, the more I just kind of didn't want to, until finally I just snapped out. I was like, look, I'm just going to go and do the podcast because it's the only thing, it's one of the few things that makes me feel good. So,
well, yeah, but now you're getting more into a conversation that's sort of more about like instant gratification, and then like putting in the work to
not really.
do
I'm
things
saying,
that you want. And
I'm
stuff
saying
too.
that the pains that people feel leads to feeling helpless, and that in itself kind of hurts. And then like it's hard for us to convince ourselves that it's not as bad as it seems, right? Like it's obviously not bad for me to come and speak on this podcast, right? It's just me. We get here, we just sit down and we have a conversation. But because of my depression, the way I was thinking about it this morning, I was thinking about, oh, it's annoying. It's going to be annoying to me right now to have to drive from my house to Mike's house. And then it's going to be annoying for me to think about ideas to talk about on the podcast, right? But it's never like that. It's always just, we just get here and we just let the conversation flow. However, because of the way I feel, I start thinking that way, and then it just starts becoming a struggle. And it's the same way with everything. It's not necessarily about like getting instant gratification, but more so like the struggle of you're falling into this motion where you just start feeling these things that you shouldn't really feel. And gaming, what's good about it, why it resonates so well with me, is because one, it's easy access. It's just push a button and you start. And then two, it's also the fact that once the game starts tricking me into thinking about it, I stop thinking about the stuff that bothers me. And then I finally get lost and I start recuperating, right? Sometimes it might take me the whole day. Sometimes I don't get recuperated. Sometimes it only takes me 30 minutes to an hour. It all depends on the day and how I feel and how the whatever personally is affecting me is affecting me.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I was thinking of something that you were talking about that you were mentioning before, but I kind of lost the thought on that. But I guess if I think about it, I'll go ahead and bring it up afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely I agree with you though that maybe gaming isn't the best solution all the time. But let me ask you this, for example, because we were talking about, I'm kind of trying to go like on a list of how I think some of the positives of gaming are, especially in terms of mental health versus like addiction or whatever. Surely, obviously, I deal with depression as well, so I know the feeling of not wanting to even do anything, like maybe just laying in bed and staring up at the roof, that's definitely not one of the best things you could do, and I don't recommend that you do it too often. But in therapy, I've learned that you're also supposed to give yourself grace. You're supposed to give yourself grace some days. So some days, surely you could be okay with just getting away with that as well. But let me ask you this. You talk about not wanting to necessarily play when you're, really depressed, maybe something that you might have to think about the mechanics and stuff. But how did you feel when, let's say, you played God of War 2018 for the first time?
Oh yeah, of course. I've mentioned it. Like the first day, I'm a pretty big and avid God of War fan, right? And that's something I also wanted to bring up, which I think now I know why you brought this up. It's something that I kind of skimmed over and I didn't really think about. Is one of the ways that, or the reasons why people binge so much, or like they just get lost in like a TV show on Netflix or this and that, is because at the moment for what they're feeling, whatever's on the show resonates with them. Even if the show, I don't know, right now for some reason Vampire Diaries is just doing it for me, right? I know the show isn't, I know some people are gonna hate me, like fans of the show are gonna hate me, but honestly, I mean, I don't consider the show to be, it's nothing like Breaking Bad or anything, and it's not some type of like writing masterpiece or anything, right? It's just a show that I watching the characters, you know, like
well, you enjoy the show, so
Yeah,
you don't
it's
have to
just-
like justify your joy of it.
I mean,
or
no,
whatever, you know?
it's just I'm not even sure I'm enjoying it. It's just the fact that it's just hitting me right now. You know what I'm saying?
It just hits different at
like,
the moment.
Yeah, it just hits different. You know, I guess I'm just built different. But my point is, it's just there's that, right? And then of course the fact when I told you like Great Teacher Onizuka, which I showed it to you at the moment when I was depressed with school and stuff, like it kind of made me rethink about like how I think about teachers and stuff. And then it also obviously it bled into my life because my college professors, I kind of had an open dialogue with them, whereas in high school or before I didn't really talk to my professors.
It kind of helped you humanize your professors a
Yeah,
little bit.
exactly.
Where instead of seeing them as this untouchable figure that's up on a pedestal, it made you realize that they clearly have their own personal life. They're just people as well that are trying to help you, and then that kind of helped them. I guess what you're trying to say is that it put them in a light, put your professors in a light where like you actually felt that they were. It was easier for you to talk to them because of how you viewed them now. So it kind of gave you like a change in perspective, I suppose.
Exactly. So there was that, and then you know, for me, God of War as a kid, like it's one of the games are very interesting because on top of what shows do, which is like, you know, everything's like acted and you can feel the actors like emotions and stuff. What God of War did that took it a step further is that they integrated it so well with the way that you would play the game that like Devil May Cry is a combo game, right? And you do a lot of button mashing, but you're doing the button mashing because you're trying to get the combos off, right? But in God of War, when you do button mashing, is because Kratos himself is also a raging maniac. So like you feel the rage alongside him, and it kind of improves the interactivity of the game. And I think that's how art is done best, when it gets you to feel something. Like when you see a painting and it gets you to feel something, that's when you know art's good. Especially music, when you start feeling like a rapper's like emotions, you know the song is good, right? In the same way, that's what God of War did. It made you feel Kratos' rage. Like you feel like he's upset when the gods betray him. You feel he's upset when a demon or whatever gets in your way and tries to block you from proceeding with the goal. So you feel Kratos' anger, and then you feel it with the controller, and that's what makes the game so great. But then they did it again with God of War 18, where I was coming off all this history of the original trilogy, just loving the way that Kratos was, and then watching Kratos not be a raging maniac for once, and instead be this emotional person who's trying to he's having conflicting emotions with like the fact that he's a father now, and he can't just, you know, he wants to let go of his past, which is vulgar, right? And he felt that he didn't need that in his life anymore, and this new type of emotion was interesting, and I felt it in the game too. Like I could feel the moments when he's upset, when like, oh snap, I gotta go save Atreus from whatever's going on. Like you could feel it, and that type of emotion is something like, because I'm so connected, it's able to break through the moments I feel depressed.
Right. I think it's
But
for
not all
you.
the
It's a connection, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, because this is kind of just my analysis of, you know, your mental state plus also playing God of War 2018. I kind of view it as you know, when you're depressed, it's kind of like you're insulated towards like the outside of your mind, in terms of like, you know, maybe you isolate yourself, you're not feeling emotions, you just feel kind of numb and stuff, or hopeless, and all of a sudden God of War 2018 presents itself to you in this shiny way, where it's this perfect storm of being an amazing narrative with very you know, compelling graphics, very compelling gameplay, very compelling sound design, a beautiful musical score, and then it also has the extremely powerful added boost of nostalgia for you, because you've been a fan of the game for a long time. So it could maybe be memories of days, you know, or of happier days that have passed or whatever. That's something that's kind of like a jolt that could take you out from where you are. You know, like if you're depressed, you might continue. This is obviously not going to cure your depression, but if I go ahead and punch you in the face and break your nose, I'm sure you're not going to be focused so much on your depression at the moment. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so
exactly. It snaps
in a
you out
way,
of it
God
for a
of War
moment.
was like a shock to your emotional system, where it was something so beautiful that not only was the nostalgia making you feel better too, but the fact that you were then drawn into this excellent universe and you were just kind of immersed in it is kind of that point that I was talking about with the escapism, where it allows you to escape the troubles of your daily life, and instead you're now enjoying this virtual universe in like a different capacity or whatever. That's kind of like the note I was talking about with the escapism. Now there are other notes in there that maybe we could talk about later with nostalgia and stuff like that, but I think pretty much that puts the lid on you know, the escapism for it, and it just really ultimately comes down to
And look, just to add into, since we're wrapping it up, just to add into it, you know, like when somebody's upset, I know that a lot of people who play COD and are people who get upset easily, they pour out the rage on the game rather than another person, right? That's just, and it's the healthiest way to do it. I mean, I know in psychology they teach you like if you're upset, go punch a pillow or something to let go of your stress, right? And then in some ways people do it with Call of Duty. They just play like 100 matches of COD or whatever throughout the week, and they just feel good about it, right? And it's the same way. Like somebody that like maybe they like horror adventures, they'll just play PT or Alien Isolation or one of those scary games, and just to kind of get the feel of it. Like it's an interesting, gaming is a great way to kind of grab those emotions and just kind of how do I put it, like boost them, like get a bigger feeling because it's being grabbed from you and then brought back to you enhanced. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think. Well, I guess you kind of brought up an interesting point there. Maybe it's not totally a different subject, but I can't necessarily say it's purely escapism we're talking about anymore. Feels like now we're talking more about like expression. I don't know if you get what I mean.
Yeah, no, I understand.
When you said how like you're bringing, like, someone could vent or use like Call of Duty to kind of like express their rage, or maybe they improve they play better when they're angry or something like that. That to me feels like it could almost be like a form of expression, and a lot of games really do allow you. I'd say almost every game really does allow you to express yourself in one form or another. Obviously you have things like Minecraft where it's literally just you create whatever you want, so it's like the ultimate expressive platform. If you do play a mode in its creative mode, you just literally build whatever you want, and that's art, and in itself that's already a very expressive thing. But you could express yourself with anything. A lot of people do sports to express themselves, and some people express themselves through boxing, some people express themselves through skiing, skateboarding, surfing. A lot of times I express myself through fighting games, right? Of course, if you're trying to be this hyper competitive beast and you fall into metas and you learn like your bread and butter combos and this and that, and maybe you could kind of visualize people as being cardboard copies of one another in that sense. But there's a lot of people who don't go that wave. You know what I mean? Like, when you look at like the Street Fighter scene, for example, Daigo Umehara, someone who was one of the most influential people in the FGC. Right now, he's playing Guile in Street Fighter 5, which I haven't really kept up with Street Fighter 5, so correct me if I'm wrong, guys, in the comments or whatever, but I'm pretty sure that Guile might be a good character. Like, he's a very strong character. I don't know if he's top tier. He's definitely high tier at the very least, but he's not automatically going Akuma, who's like the best character like ever. Like, he's just literally like untouchable. And same thing in Street Fighter 4, he didn't really just automatically jump to like a high tier character. He kind of chooses a character that's always in line with how he's feeling towards the game, and that kind of allows him to be expressive with how he wants to play.
Yeah, no, but I mean, now you're kind of getting into also like not only expressing yourself, but like how you feel about it too. Because I mean, I know our good old friend Danilo loved playing as Gil because he could destroy us like infinitely with like, or instantly with the freaking the comet balls, and then doing like his ult that just instantly wipes the entire map. But then like, as a person like myself, although I like seeing power, like I love One Punch Man and all that stuff, it's like One Punch Man says it best. It's like, I'm so strong now. It's like everything's just mundane to me because like I literally can't die or anything, right? So it's like when you play with a character, like for example, he might be feeling like, oh, I'm great as Akuma, but like I literally can't lose. So I rather just play something with a bit more risk and just try and learn something new as well, because that's how it goes too. With especially me with games. I love trying out new games. You've seen me that every time a new franchise, I hear about a new franchise, the first thing I do is I go back to the very, very, very first game and I start to adopt the entirety of the philosophy of why the developers did the game the way they did, because I want to study like the difference of it. I'm tired of playing the same old Call of Duty, Uncharted, God of War, whatever. Granted, I'm not saying those games are bad. I'm just saying I'm tired of playing them constantly. So like with the emotions and how I feel at the moment, I just jump into something new and try seeing something through a different lens.
Well, yeah, but that's still more in the that's kind of looking at it still through like the positivity of video games through the ways of immersion and stuff like that. When I mean that, because I kind of like put the lid on immersion already, unless you really feel like you have more to say about it. What I'm talking about is literally just the ability to express yourself too, because a lot of the times, like escapism or immersion isn't necessarily the only thing that there is to it, you know what I mean? Because that could only go so far. Let's say if a game like what is it? Heavy
well, I mean,
Rain?
we could talk about the fact that cosmetics are monetized, and then people try to find a way to express themselves how they feel best.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to tell you.
cosmetics.
Like, I'm not necessarily talking about the ability to just sink into a game anymore. Like, let's say if you have one of those really heavily movie-like games, like what, like Heavy Rain, is that one of them?
Yeah.
Heavy Rain, that's like one of those super narrative movie-style games. You can only, really get, you can only really express yourself so much through that game compared to a game that like Minecraft, that you can literally just build whatever you want, right? That's what I'm trying to say. Is that literally every game you play allows for a different form to express yourself. So if you go for a fighting game, look at the characters you like to choose versus the characters that I like to choose. You typically choose, I noticed, either in your case, you either go for protagonists, or you typically go for rush down characters, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong there. That's just the observation I've made.
In what?
In fighting games.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I just picked the simplest characters, but I mean, it all depends. Like the ones that resonate with what I'm feeling. Like I know Little Mac isn't a protagonist and all, but he's just the character I pick and smash
but he's
every
a rush
time.
down character though.
Huh?
I noticed you either go for protagonists or rush down characters. I don't know. That's just like your thing.
Well, what's rush down character? I'm lost.
A rush down character is like kind of someone who has like high movement speed. Their whole game plan is kind of revolves around them closing distances, and they typically have like faster attacks and like longer combos and stuff. But maybe their range isn't that great, or they have poor zoning options.
Well, yeah. Okay, so yeah, rush down characters is essentially I guess that fits in with my playstyle for fighting games, or just in general. I mean, that's why I love God of War, right? It's the character that literally rushes down and just destroys everything in his path.
Yeah.
I mean, but it all depends on what it is. Because, for example, in RPGs, right, I always felt that I expressed myself easily because I found RPGs so daunting. I always felt that, especially with old school RPGs. Let's just put it out there. Like old school RPGs, you do the wrong, you screw up, and you have to restart the whole game, right? Because there wasn't really a way to respec until like the later 2000s games. And I'm talking about like the OG Diablo games and all that stuff that you once you did your upgrades, you're kind of just done, right? So I would always pick the warrior or like the barbarian or whatever, because it's just the simplest to build. It's just put damage on it, just put highest armor, and then just go nuts, right? But then I really started to push myself to start thinking different. So for example, when Destiny came out, I pushed myself to play. I normally pick the simplest character, right? And the simplest character is usually a rushdown character because they have the simplest mechanics. Just run forward and attack, right? There's no like zoning or anything like that that's necessary, right? And you can see that in Mass Effect, I used to pick the soldier character. When I first played Dragon Age, I picked the warrior class and all that stuff, that sort of stuff, right? But when Destiny came out, I really tried to change that mentality. I started with the warlock, and to this day, it's still my main character. And essentially, the warlock, compared to the other characters, is one that you kind of take some time. I mean, you kind of take some range, especially in the early days of Destiny, like Destiny 1. It's a range character. Your ult isn't one where you, like the Titan, where you just go and smash in an area. No, you have to shoot your bomb from far away because you can blow yourself up. Your grenades are more about like, ranged attacks rather than just immediate explosions, that sort of stuff. And like the character wasn't really that great at being up in your face, unlike the Titan, which is all about, sprinting and like shoulder charging somebody in the face and all that. And then, in Dragon Age, when I replayed it again to go for the platinum, I decided to read some information as to the other classes, and I ended up preferring the mage class because the mage class can literally just throw a freaking lightning storm and destroy everything. So I was like, oh, that's cool. So I decided to start playing as a mage in that game. And then as time went on, I just started picking different characters that I resonated with. For example, I went back to play one of those old school RPGs, and rather than play the simple warrior, I decided to pick the vampire. And the vampire is interesting because like I have less defense, and the only way I could heal is by hurting other people. I think the game is called Sacred, the game. So like I had to really rethink how I approached scenarios. So I've kind of been shying away from that, but yes, generally rushdown characters is like my bread and butter. Like I mean, I love the Flash for a reason.
Yeah,
I
think the whole reason why I was bringing this up was because like kind of talking about how it's like expression in a video game is a positive thing. One of the biggest things that I struggled with prior to like my 11th or 12th year in school, when I was in high school, before my junior year, or like maybe around my sophomore year is when I kind of changed it, was that I used to be a very shy person. And I think that finding ways to express myself in video games was always kind of something that aided me with eventually like understanding how I should be aiming to try to express myself in real life. You know, like in real life, a lot of the times, if you're a shy person, especially, sometimes you withhold your opinions or expressing yourself because you fear that, you know, if you've been ostracized or you feel like you never were like kind of one that fit in the crowd, or you kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. You a lot of times you will voice your opinions because maybe you feel like your opinion isn't valid because you're a weirdo, or like it doesn't hold weight, or you're just afraid that other people are going to disagree with you and put you down for your opinion or whatever. And so expressing yourself in a video game is like kind of a interesting way that you could kind of find out more about your personality. And obviously, I think, I'm not saying that video games is like the best way to go ahead and start expressing yourself, because the more, if you become like too immersed into it or whatever, it might actually make you more antisocial and stuff. But I'm just saying, paired with trying to be more outgoing, maybe you know, sign up for drama, try making more friends, or, you know, join team sports or something like that. That might help you a little bit more. But like just finding out, like anything that you do that you start finding out more about your personality with, I think is something that's beneficial. So for me, for example, and this is actually something that's funny because my girlfriend pointed out to me like a couple of weeks ago. I had no idea that this was the case. I tend to pick villains in fighting games, which I didn't even realize. And ultimately, I was going to talk to you about it because you just kind of went into a different direction. But I find it funny that I know that now, like with RPGs and stuff, you're experimenting with some of the more like creative, or some of the more thought-provoking type of classes, like with the Warlock in Destiny and stuff like that. And I think that is a form of expression. I mean, you could kind of give me your own take on why you really wanted to go with the Warlock in Destiny, but I also think there's also some more gratification in terms of that, where like you're not really sitting down and doing highly repetitive gameplay. I think the Warlock might present you with more opportunities to play differently or something like that.
It all depends on how you look at the game. You know, I mean, people to this day will swear to us that Destiny isn't a repetitive game, and then, you know, there's people.
I mean, I think Destiny, no matter what's, a super repetitive game.
Then, right, and then there's people that'll swear to us that a game like Minecraft is repetitive, right? Because all you do is just go get materials and stuff. It all depends on how you see it and how you simplify what you're looking at, right? I mean, to me, Minecraft, I would say it's repetitive because you only have one goal, and it's just survive and just craft. Well, but then you look at it and it's like, yeah, you have a simplistic goal, but you have really infinitesimal
water
creativity.
Down things or whatever, you could ultimately say that everything is really repetitive or not repetitive.
Yeah, it all depends on how you water down. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, as far as you playing villains, I mean, let's think about it, right? So, Street Fighter, your favorite character is Ken. That's not a villain.
No, Akuma.
When? You always used to play as Ken.
Akuma? No, I didn't always used to play as Ken. I preferred Ken to Ryu because Ken is faster and like.
Yeah, but you always used to pick Ken when we would do our Street Fighter days.
No, man, no. Don't you remember it? Literally, I always did Akuma. I would like.
And even when I learned how to play as a Ryu, you would spar with me as either Danny Beaky or.
Okay, but Danny Beaky was the troll pick, and then Ken was just. I think the reason why I didn't. Okay, so when I was just playing the game, like you know, as a novice, I did do Ken just because I think I preferred like I finally learned how to do the Hadoken and the Shoryuken and stuff like that, and I thought that his were always better, you know. And I did feel like he was a faster character than Ryu, but when I actually started learning about fighting games, I went ahead and picked Akuma. But the only thing that kept me away from Akuma was I thought that doing his Raging Demon input, you know, which was the XX back B right trigger or whatever it is, or right bumper or whatever, I thought that was super intimidating. At the time, and I thought that doing all his flips and stuff were super intimidating, but once I got the hang of it, I thought it was great.
I mean, I could definitely see you picking a lot of villain characters, but I mean, there are times when you don't. Like, for example, Mortal Kombat, your favorite character is Kung Lao.
Yeah, that's true.
He's a protagonist, but I mean, in Injustice, your favorite character is Doomsday.
My favorite characters in Injustice were Doomsday and Superman, which, funnily enough, in that game, Superman was a villain. Now, I mean, that's like already like kind of like, you know, here or there, because there was a version of Superman that was a good guy and a version of Superman that was a bad guy. Yeah. But, you know, when you play as him, he acts like a villain in that game. And then, you know, Doomsday was another pick. And then who was my main in Injustice 2? Darkseid. Who was my main, like my two mains in Smash Brothers. You have the ones I play the most are King K. Rool and Sephiroth.
Oh, yeah, and let's not forget what's this guy's name? The other Ganondorf. There you go.
Yeah, also, Ganondorf. That's like 3 villains right there. You know what I mean? When you look at
that's because in a lot of those games, right? Like for example, in Mortal Kombat, all the characters look pretty gruff and interesting, right? But when you look at, you might just like gruff characters, and when you look at Smash, like all the good characters are like wide-eyed Pikachus versus like the villains, which are like just look like, you know, cool and stuff. Same thing with the superhero stuff. In Injustice, the superheroes are just look like pretty generic, and then like the villains are just like, you know, like they're
a little
like,
bit more attention grabbing or something.
They're more attention grabbing in their design and stuff.
Ultimately, I don't know. If I mean, this is already starting to get like kind of harebrained and maybe like just too meta or whatever. But if I think about it, I think that for me, it kind of comes down to the sense of, you know, when I play fighting games and stuff, I'm doing it because it's kind of like a cool way of like communicating with another person that you're playing with. It's kind of like speaking with your fists, almost like when it's like real life, like boxing or fighting or something like that. Yeah. It's like you're having a back and forth with a person. It's kind of like you're competing to see who is better, and then you're kind of having fun just doing that. But also it's an act of just trying to improve yourself constantly to do better more and more. And so to me, I guess if you think about like the consciousness of what happens when I pick a villain, I kind of feel like it's like, oh, I'm your obstacle that you have to overcome. And it's kind of like makes it more fun to me because it, like, I mean, I don't think this, right? Like, it's not like I'm a psychopath who's like, all right, thinking like, oh, yeah, I'm going to pick Doomsday so I can make Jordan fight Doomsday or whatever. It's more just like, if in my subconscious, maybe it kind of feels like I'm setting the situation up where I'm the bad guy and I'm going to be a douchebag to you or whatever. And you have to try to beat me to save the day. And you know, I don't know if you get what I mean. You know what I mean? Yeah, like, yeah. It gets like an extra air of playfulness to it when I feel like I'm the villain within the situation of playing the game. And funnily enough, I was going to tie that into like how I noticed that either a lot of the times we play Rushdown or just straight up the protagonist a lot of times.
Well, but think about it like this. A lot of times too, the protagonist is the Rushdown character because like usually the villain's the one that has all the extra gadgets and abilities because he's the villain. So, you know, and then the hero's always like the underdog that has like, you know, weak abilities.
The
and
way
then they have
that
to
fighting
do it.
games are designed is that most of the times the protagonists are just the most balanced character because they're always the what's the word
right, but
like
look,
the model that the other characters are based off against.
Yeah,
when you're designing a fighting game, you're not just thinking of like, oh, let's put cool characters and that's it. You're also looking at the functionality that every character serves within the roster, and then you always make like a base to compare everything else up against. You know what I mean?
I agree. It's just, I mean, for me personally, the way I think about it, other than Street Fighter, like generally, it's kind of hard for me to play with thinking about zoning. Like I'm a person that gets too complicated for me. And again, it all goes back to what we were speaking about earlier, that for me, between the depression line, like it's very hard to get into stuff. So if the rushdown characters is usually the simplest one because you only have like a couple options to just run forward and attack or counter or whatever, right? So that's why like on Soul Calibur, I pick whatchamacallit, this guy for Justice or whatever. No, well, I used to pick Kilik, but now I just pick this guy.
Well, that was Soul Calibur 5 though, so he's gone. What's his name? The Sophia's son. I forgot what his name is. Sasuke. I call him Sasuke because he's voiced by Yuri Lowenthal. Everyone who's voiced by Yuri Lowenthal is automatically just Sasuke for me. So literally, Peter Parker and Spider-Man is just Sasuke Parker.
Parker Uchiha.
Parker Uchiha.
Peter Uchiha. Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, I mean, it all depends. Like, yeah, and then in Street Fighter, I pick Little Mac. I'm just like, oh, Little Mac is, you know, he's pretty rad.
Little Mac, that was weird to me that you just chose Little Mac because I was just out of the blue. I used
to pick Link, but it's just understanding every other character. Again, it goes to the thing. It's understanding everyone else is just pretty difficult for me versus just Mac, which just, you know, he has run forward attack or counter. That's it. He doesn't really have much.
I mean, the whole thing about Lil Mac is that you have to play on the ground if you try doing anything.
Yeah, but that's the simplicity of it that attracts me. That's what I'm saying.
I guess. Well, maybe if you're just going for simplicity. I mean, I don't know how you could tie that into expression, but again, that is you simply expressing yourself with how you choose to play and what characters you're going with, and that's, you know, what you did with Destiny as well when you chose a Warlock, maybe, or well, that could be the perfect segue to the next positivity or the next positive aspect that could be brought forth by gaming, which is challenging yourself.
Right.
You know, I think that when it comes to growing as a person and stuff like that, challenging yourself is actually something that's really important. Like putting yourself out of, you know, your comfort zone. Now, far be it from me to say that if you sit here and grind so hard at Smash Bros or whatever that you're going to be the best person ever, right? Like, I don't think that's how that works. It's kind of more like, to put in a video game reference, Skyrim, right? In Skyrim, you have like 99 different skills, and the way that you level up each one is by doing that particular skill and kind of getting out of your comfort zone and doing that repeatedly to level up that certain stat. That's kind of like how real life is. If you say, oh, I don't want to run, it hurts. Well, guess what? You're going to get gassed out every single time you try jogging for 30 seconds, and you'll probably be out of shape and you'll never be able to run very far. But if you run and you push yourself past your point of exhaustion and do it regularly every single day, eventually you're going to get fitter, you're going to have health benefits from it, and then guess what? You're going to be able to run more and more and do it longer without feeling as bad while doing it and things like that, and then you reap the benefits of that. That's kind of the same thing when it comes to gaming and the mentality, even though it might not apply to every, challenging yourself by playing games might not have benefits directly to the rest of your life. You could always look at it as more of a mental aspect where it could teach you the mentality required to push yourself to accomplish something that's not pleasurable at a certain point. That might actually give you the key understanding of that mentality that you could then carry to other aspects of your life. So let's say if you sit down and you play Demon Souls, or I don't know, you want to play Devil May Cry or whatever, right? Some games are kind of known for being difficult. And everyone's always hyping up Devil May Cry. Everyone's hyping up Demon Souls. But all of a sudden, you just get wrecked, and now you're kind of discouraged because it was super hard. I'm not saying that if you see it through to the end that you finish Demon Souls or Devil May Cry, that now your life's going to be in order. You're going to have perfect grades. You're going to have a lot of money coming in. You have a wife. You have a house. You have, none of that. But if you start to reflect on the act of you trying to overcome this super difficult obstacle instead of just enjoying yourself in a brain dead fashion, just letting everything be easy, and you tell yourself, well, you know what, me not wanting to go to the gym, okay, I don't want to go to the gym because it's kind of hard.
I think now I know where you're getting at. So let me try and summarize just to make sure I'm following through. You're basically saying like you have struggles and problems, and then you're personifying them within the game, and then you're trying to overcome them within the game. Is essentially what you're saying. Like
I mean, that's a little too like meta, like that.
I know it's just meta, but it's just
like, I have this bully at school. Let me turn him into the Devil May Cry boss and just
not like to that extent. But I'm just saying like your feelings take on a life of its own in the game, and then you're kind of following through with it by overcoming them. Is what you're saying?
Not per se. You're like kind of close, but it's sort of like. Okay, let's say...
Especially in Demon Souls, it makes perfect sense because that's literally how everyone feels. It's like you're literally conquering your demons.
It's kind of like, let's say, I mean, let me see, like to put it in a way that might be a little bit easier for you to understand. So like, let's say in real life, let's say you work at a certain office store that might offer technology repair services.
Oh my God. Why you gotta bring my past?
And then let's say, the whole time you're just used to being a cashier and that's all you do. Right. And that's fine and dandy. But, you notice that, number one, you're not getting that many hours and you're not getting that much money. All of a sudden, it's made aware to you that if you go ahead and try to take on doing cell phone repairs, additionally to just cashiering, you're going to get commission off of doing your cell phone repairs. And then you're going to be scheduled more hours because now you're of more use to your store. That's something that's going to be challenging. It's going to be uncomfortable because you just want to be a cashier. You're not comfortable performing the responsibilities of a cell phone repair person, but if you want the additional benefits of having more money, more hours worked, and plus the commission, you're going to have to go through that very uncomfortable struggle of learning a new skill, maybe failing at it a couple times, pissing off a few customers, learning how to deal with those issues before you reap the benefits of being a cell phone repairman. You can't just get the salary, commission, and everything of a cell phone repairman if you're only going to be a cashier. So what I'm saying is, for a lot of people that might be antisocial or that don't have somebody to just teach them that or tell them that, I'm thinking that playing difficult games might actually be something that could help them learn or understand that mentality of reward for doing something difficult. And you don't have to necessarily jump to something like Demon Souls or you know, Devil May Cry or Ninja Gaiden or something like that for you to follow that. Maybe an example of that could come in, like if you're looking at Destiny, right? We were having that conversation about accessibility and all that. You told me that I believe the Magnums are some of the better guns or something, or like sniping is some of the better things that you could do in Destiny and all that.
The hand cannons are normally like the easiest, most like accurate weapons you can use to attack. I mean, the easiest weapon obviously to use is the assault rifle. In any game, the AR is just haha, go burr, you know, wherever you want, right? But I mean, if you want to train yourself, like the hand cannon's a good way, because you have to deal with fall off range. You have to deal with the fact that you can't shoot as fast. That you have less ammo in the clip and all that stuff. So it kind of helps you train, but the weapon's so powerful enough for you to keep up. And
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So when you're playing Destiny, then the PvP, you could kind of say that the hand cannon's meta in the sense where it's the most powerful weapon or whatever. But for you to reap the benefits of using the hand cannon, you can't just get an AR, run out there and be like, wait, why am I losing to everyone who's good with a hand cannon? You kind of have to go through the uncomfortable decision to, number one, step away from the assault rifle, and number two, you know, get good and take the time to face the difficulties of using the hand cannon, overcome those obstacles, and now all of a sudden, boom, you're reaping the benefits of having learned the skill set to play the hand cannon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's very much the same thing in real life, I find. And that's actually a mentality that helped me a lot. To me, something that helped me grow a lot, believe it or not, was actually fighting games. Because I really wanted to be good at fighting games, because that was kind of like what we did hanging out as kids. And so I started learning about it. And the biggest thing that they always tell you is that, number one, you find your character, find the character that you like to play, that you like to express yourself as, that's really cool, and you know, get good as them. Then understand how all the other characters play, and understand how your character plays against all the other ones. But then when you get to like the third stage of getting better at it, you kind of like chuck out those first two phases. Not really, like you obviously still need to understand the like how the characters interact and all that, but then it literally just comes all down to like mind games and just constantly improving your mind games and how you interact with the other player and stuff like that.
Yeah,
that's something that takes a lot of self-improvement and a lot of like self you have to observe yourself and really see where your flaws are in your gameplay, and acquiring that mentality of being critical of myself and seeking to improve myself every day. That really helped me out in many things. It's helped me out in my work ethic. It's helped me out in my health. You know, back when I was really hitting the gym hard, we would go to the gym for like, we had gone to the gym like for what, a total of 5 years or something like that, or 4 years.
On and off, yeah.
When we first went to the gym, I went for 2 years and I never saw any results. And I was like, bro, this is clearly a bunch of bullshit. It's probably because of the way that my body is just made that I can't get fit. And, you know, then you introduced me to Athlete X and his videos and how great and helpful those were. And I just realized, no, it was that I, number one, wasn't putting in enough work. And then number two, I wasn't doing things correctly. So I took it upon myself, or we took it upon ourselves, to properly learn how to exercise and things of that nature. And then the other half, once you showed me how it's kind of done, was me putting in the effort and being honest with myself and really asking myself, am I putting in that work? You know, I never used to train or lift until failure. I started doing that. I made sure my form was impeccable. I would drop the ego lifting, go down to a weight that was actually manageable to me, and then just focus on getting the motion done right, making sure I would slow down, tear into the muscle, and I wouldn't stop until I literally couldn't lift it anymore. That is the perfect example.
You gotta put it in the rhomboid.
Yeah, just activate the rhomboid, man. Jeff Cavalier, Athlete X here. You want to be, you want to look like an athlete, train like an athlete, all that stuff. But you know, shout out to Jeff. He's in my opinion, one of the best fitness creators out there.
Yeah, honestly, what I love about him is that despite the fact that obviously, you know, he has to push and promote like his own brand, it didn't stop him from actually coaching and teaching people regardless. Like he like the only thing he offers you separately from everyone else is, of course, like, you know, how every other fitness pro does, which is like his nutritional stuff, and then of course like the fact that you go through his training programs when you need that additional help. But if you actually just literally sit down one day and just watch all of his videos and then apply them in real life, you're gonna get the same results. You just have to listen to what he says. It's just what it is.
I totally
Unlike
agree.
the other ones that just like hide it, it's like, oh, pay me whatever for me to help you out.
And
it's
a
like,
lot of the times they'll just straight up lie to you to get your money too, like
yeah,
V-Shred.
No point crapping on V-Shred.
Hey, bro, look, you want to look like me? I'm good looking, right? Look, you just got to eat pizza. Like, yeah, right, dude. you probably
like,
spit that
I mean,
pizza
Jeff
out like 2
Keller said
seconds
it too.
after
Like, it's
recording.
okay to treat, like he says, it's okay to treat yourself, but like, be honest with yourself too. Like, I mean, he says it too. It's like, I'm not gonna tell you to sacrifice sweet potatoes. You know, incorporating your meal every
it all
once in
just
a while.
comes down to calories. If you like eat the right amount of calories to like maintain your weight or whatever, you'll be fine. But
Yeah, and that you exercise adequately.
I'm not gonna believe that V-Shred sits down and guzzles a pizza every day and then looks like that. That's just, you know, dishonest marketing to say the least. And I honestly don't even know if he like knows what he's talking about at the time. But I digress.
Yeah,
you know,
especially because he's trying to look like Jeff Cavalier as well. He even has the same hairstyle and everything, dude.
What do you think about the benefits? Like, do you see any benefits of like actually getting a challenge from a video game? Like, has there actually even been a time where you could say that like challenging yourself in a video game has even reflected or somehow helped you grow?
Look, okay, so there's two ways to go about that. One, I'm a pretty big fan of like games like God of War, Ninja Gaiden, and Demon Souls, right? Devil May Cry not so much, but that's just because again I like simplicity, and Devil May Cry is all about style, so my brain just short circuits, and I have to go back, and I'm planning to get the entire series again on PS5, and you know replaying everything. I'm just not doing it yet because I know Capcom's gonna do some baloney stuff where we're like, hey guys, look, new edition with 120 FPS and this and that, and they're gonna infinitely make new versions every 2 years. So I'm just waiting for them to pick one before I jump in. But anyways, my point is, based off of those games, like I always liked the fact that there was like a challenge, and the challenge of it is kind of like a puzzle. Like you're trying to figure out the best way to do it based off what you have in the game. But the game always sort of sets you up to be able to succeed. You just have to learn how to piece together everything, right? No matter how hard the game is, you almost always have like some form of path that you can take or some form of ability that you can use that can kind of help you, overcome the obstacles. Like for example, right now I'm doing the God of War on Give Me God of War difficulty. One of the things that's interesting is that on top of the fact that they made the enemies harder to, I mean, that like they made them, hit harder and have more health. Now they also have increased resistance to stun, and they have a rage which upgrades them to a higher level. So there's a lot of things I have to really think about before just jumping in, because in the old God of War it's just simply you just go in and smack, and it's just how good you did it. Now it's like not only is it how good I do it, but when I do it, and depending on what type of enemies I have in the field. So those are always fun, and those are always like lately I haven't been. And I'm hoping that through God of War now I can kind of jump back into it. But back in the day, I used to spend hours upon hours. And you remember, I would spend hours figuring out how to get past the stupid, combat scenario in Ninja Gaiden. So I think those things kind of helped me out because it kind of gave me this mentality of I got to try and figure it out so that I can not only be able to do it in the future, but it can help me out. And that helped me out at work. Like when I didn't know anything about laptops compared to some of the other associates.
Are your headphones aren't even plugged in? Yo, I'm just gonna take these off because mine stopped working a while ago too, so I don't even know why we have these on, dude. I could hear you much more clearly without.
Doing it for the look.
No, I don't. I could hear you much more clearly without them, and I know especially those are noise canceling. So I don't even know how you were like replying to me at this point, but
well, it's not that hardcore noise canceling, but anyways, essentially, I remember in Office Depot, especially me as a person who like barely knew anything about technology or whatever. Because I challenged myself and I would go through the trial and error of, reading through Google and just working down each and every single problem, I was able to figure out how to repair computers, how to take out their parts and stuff. And of course, our manager at the time, our general manager, was a big tech guy, so he knew about technology and how to repair them and stuff. And because I never gave up, because of like my never-ending will to just keep going back in the day, like what I did with Demon Souls, where I would just keep challenging myself, going through each and everything. It translated to that, and in my work ethic, I became more responsible, much more prominent. I got promoted because of it.
Well, part of that was also me slapping you around a little bit too.
Well, no, but that's how it works. You get slapped around. But the point is, if I would have given up, And
I think, interestingly enough, what you're saying about how you learn to think from like God of War and stuff, I think that really reflects in how you problem solve and just how you like think about. Well, yeah, mainly how you problem solve, like, or how you think. Like, I notice a lot of times when you and me have conversations that we try to think about, like, let's say things we want to do for content.
I take things out of my ass.
A little bit, but
yeah, at least talking to your
but
ass.
like, I don't know, you have a different way of viewing things compared to me that's really valuable, because a lot of the times it's like, I see something one way and then I kind of get stuck, and then it's like your perspective is very fresh, and then we kind of get like, a look that's outside of the box. I don't know. I feel like you have a very way, like you have a way of thinking of things that's very outside of the box sometimes, and I think it might be due to the fact that you try to observe like all those additional details, or like you're really pensive. I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of like the fact that you're annoyed that when the first thing, the first memorable thing I had from Vampire Diaries is the fact that the witch girl's jaw is like shifted sideways or whatever, and you're like, Jordan, what the hell, dude? You're watching the whole show. That's the only thing you got out of it. I was like, yeah, but it's the only thing that spoke out to me.
For some reason, I also always just feel like you have some weird fascination with talking about girls and their jaws, dude. I don't know.
No, it's just that I just noticed that because I have TMJ. I have an issue with my jaw. I have pain and it causes headaches. So when I see people with a messed up jaw, or it's not that hers is messed up. It's just you could clearly tell it's sideways. In my head, I'm thinking, oh snap, that person might be feeling my pain. So I'm noticing. It's kind of like when you don't have orange juice for a long time, and all of a sudden you buy one, and all of a sudden you start seeing commercials for it everywhere, and you start realizing that orange juice is everywhere.
Oh, it's like, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, because I realize it now. I know what you're saying. Where I sometimes just on my ass and something, but it's true. I mean, I just focus on things differently because I always. But that's also something that I try to correlate with the fact that I'm always watching so many different TV shows and stuff. Like, for example, when we got out of Imperial Freight, that we finished doing all the logistics stuff, all of a sudden, every time we would watch a TV show, it's like you watch Breaking Bad, it's like, I understand what they mean now by importing the materials and stuff to make them the meth. And it's like, you start realizing things you didn't before. And that's why a lot of times I like to replay, Jack and Daxter, Sly Cooper and all that stuff every once in a while. Because when I was a kid, you only know so much, so it only impacts you in a certain way. But then as you start learning about emotion, psychology, and all that stuff through school, and then you eventually get to your job, you start realizing things you didn't before, and it becomes more emotionally grabbing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Because you can relate to it more. Yeah. But that's already talking about like a whole different phenomenon, though. That's kind of how
I'm just explaining how
if you're not aware of something, it doesn't exist. And then once you have awareness, you bring awareness to it, you do start seeing it. That's like kind of the weird thing, like the whole blind spot thing. Like if you look at, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the picture, but basically it's like a person looking at a cookie, and then if in a textbook, and then like if you look at it with one eye and you get within a certain range, like the cookie will disappear because of your blind spot or whatever. That's kind of like that same effect, where like if you're not aware that something exists, out of sight, out of mind, right?
Yeah.
So that's like a whole different thing. But how long have we been going, by the way, already? I'm sorry guys, usually I sit in front of the monitor so I can actually keep track of how much time is going on and stuff, but we're trying the different approach today, so I actually don't know.
I mean, we're over an hour, but that's fine.
No, but does it say there? Like, just check on the bottom, like next to the square. What does it say?
It says like 117.
117. Okay, yeah. Perfect. I think we should transition to more of the dark side of gaming, or do you feel like there's actually more positives you want to talk about? Oh, well, I guess quickly, I don't want to get too meta on it, because then we're just going to be like, the positive things about gaming. That's just going to be the podcast where we literally advertise it about addiction. I mean, we could just close it out talking about good things about gaming, but I kind of want to jump into like the dichotomy of like how it could be bad and stuff too.
No, yeah, of course. I've been waiting to talk about the addiction because I have a couple of stories I want to share, and like, of course, my personal coming.
So, lastly, I think games, especially now with the internet, have been great for socialization. Now, what do I mean by that? Well,
I mean, dude, didn't we argue about Breath of the Wild? And like the fact that it's like one of the best multiplayer games ever because of how it connects the community with trying to figure out all the different ways to solve the puzzle.
Well, okay, but that's like already too meta again. Like, okay, just to make it quick, video games have always had a way of kind of bringing people together. But really, that's any hobby. It's just that video games is another medium. Whereas if you do feel like you're ostracized because you don't like sports, or you don't like maybe you don't like movies or TV or whatever. If you do like games, that's just another avenue that you have to connect with other people, So gaming was always kind of that thing for me where, I made a friend here or two because maybe as a kid, like I really liked Godzilla movies or like dinosaurs, obviously what kid didn't, I like Jurassic Park, whatever. And that was kind of a few things that helped me make friends or whatever. But then I remember making friends specifically because we both loved Legend of Zelda and Ocarina of Time. And we would talk about Legend of Zelda for hours and hours. And then they introduced me to Smash Brothers and that helped out our friendship or whatever. I literally remember, I think my first interaction with you ever when I met you in like the sixth grade, You were just like a chunky boy with like a big backpack with a gray hoodie. Was that we were having some sort of discussion, I think, about graphics, and we're like, well, man, graphics don't actually matter. I mean, look at Call of Duty versus like Doom, you know, on the Nintendo or whatever. And I was just like, whatever. I don't know this kid.
I don't know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about. I was talking about like COD versus Halo. It was like,
no, dude, we were talking about you specifically brought up Doom. I remember that was in Miss Burnell's class.
I didn't really play Doom when I was a kid or knew much about it, so it's kind of hard for me to think of myself thinking about that game specifically. But I know what you're getting at. I remember having the conversation, but it wasn't in that class. It was in the homeroom because I remember specifically the teacher looked at me sideways.
No. That was 8th grade. I met you in the 6th grade. That was 8th grade, and that was talking about Alan Wake and Call of Duty and Halo. That was
no, but we
different.
had the graphic conversation again for sure because I remember the homeroom teacher looked at us sideways. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, you know, the teacher.
I remember. Oh, I actually think that was Mr. Valteziotti.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that,
he
right?
looked at me. He looked at us sideways, and to the left of me was that kid. I forget his name, but basically, it's just a kid that used to rage all the time.
And like Damien.
He used to be. Well, don't say his name, man. But yeah, he used to be very upset all the time, and like
there's like 5,000 Damiens. No one's gonna track down.
Oh yeah, of course. And I mean, in general, the kid used to really crap on other people's opinions when they didn't agree with him. And
I used to think he was funny.
Oh yeah, no, it's funny when it's not directed towards you. But it's like, of course, when it's directed towards you, you're like, hey, dude, stop. But
I was middle school, dude. Like, yeah, no one acts the same way. It's fine, you know.
No,
like,
of course.
Maybe it bothered you in the day, but I'm sure he's a chill guy now.
No, I don't really care. I was just saying, like, you know, it's just funny that he was like that, right? And at the time, you know, it could.
But okay, let's not get too meta because we want to get to the addiction component.
My point is, yeah, it's like the graphic thing was a conversation that we were just having, and I was trying to say that graphics weren't as important because I was like, there's so many other games out there that are really fun and don't have like, you know, Halo 3 graphics, right? That was just my.
Well, but the point is that even in bringing up conversations like that. With you, that kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say that really was the spark that led to our friendship. I don't even know how that our friendship even happened now, to be completely honest with you.
It was in high school. It was just.
I know it was in high school. I don't know what in the world literally took it off. No, wait, was it Italian? I thought it was. We had English, right? With the.
No, it ended up just being Italian.
Trimble.
Like, I mean, we would all, we were in Trimble stuff and we all kind of sat together, but it didn't really hit off. I mean, like, we would all hang out together, like, as a group, we were friends. And then, of course, I invited everyone to my house. It's like, oh,
yeah, but I don't know at one point you even became part of the group. Because I remember it was me, it was Landy, it was Danilo, and it was John. And then you somehow came in.
Yeah, because
you replaced Landy.
I had John in intensive reading or something. And then I had Danilo and you in the English class, the literature class. So then, you know, one day Danilo, like, we were just having a conversation. Danilo's just like, oh, follow me. And at first I was, you know, with Dowden and, you know, Serge and all the old school friends from like back in the day. But then, you know, they kind of went off into their own conversation and started having their own friends. And then I did the same. I just started looking for somebody different. And for me, it was just more fun to talk about things with you guys. Because I guess, you know, Sergio was trying to find his film buff people, which I wasn't into. And then Dowden was finding, you know, his friends in engineering because he was trying to learn all that stuff, so he went off with them. And then I was just like, you know, I wanted the gaming thing, and then that was us.
Oh,
so
okay.
I followed along,
sense.
but you and me specifically didn't really hit it off 100% until one day I was like, Michael, Italian's so hard, and you're like, oh, I lived in Italy like years ago, and I can help you out. And then you invited me to your house, and then that's how it went. And then like your mom sat down with us and started helping us out with the homework. And then the following year, you took a class, and then.
I see.
You jumped into Italian.
Yeah. But anyway, I remember just having interactions with you, and I guess you kind of, I mean, since you mentioned it right there, gaming was kind of the primary motivating factor for why you became my friend outside of just wanting help in Italian as well.
Yeah.
You know, you were seeking a clique that was into gaming, and that's pretty much the point that I was looking for. So even with the absence of the internet, and like, you know, or with the absence of multiplayer games and making friends like on PSN or Xbox Live and all that, you can still make friends via gaming in real life, just sharing the common interests as with any other interest. And then that was taken to a whole nother degree when Xbox Live became a thing, and then, you know, PlayStation Network and all that. Now you're playing games. You can literally see the names of people playing games with you, and now you could just be like, hey, you want to be my friend? We can literally just play this game together.
Yeah.
And I have met so many people because of that. And I know you especially met a lot of people because of that. Because of Destiny, you were meeting people like in real life and stuff from like the people who played Destiny with you, which is just literally crazy. That's like actually making like real friends like off of a game.
Yeah, to an extent I was. I mean, I don't keep up with all of them, of course, because like what brought us together was the game, and the one thing that tore us apart was the game. Because of the way not only who I was as a person back in the day, but also the fact that they also had their struggles.
I'm not gonna lie. I think I have to use a restroom. You think you can hold it down for a little bit?
I don't think so right now, bro. You sure?
Yeah. Why don't you talk about? Just
look. You know what? Let's just start transitioning our addiction for real, because we're just gonna keep skirting it, but we're not gonna talk it. So I guess
really need to go. I'm not gonna make it till another hour to the end of the podcast or anything. I really need to go. Just give me a second.
Yeah, I'll just get started, I guess. I mean, look, to start, addiction is something that's very hard to talk about, because you have to realize what addiction is, right? It's something that the way it was described to me by psychologists is that addiction is essentially something that you cannot, as a person, control. If you are addicted to something, you are compelled continuously to follow through with that addiction at like, without stopping. Basically, there's no full stop. There's no way to get out of it. You might be able to get out of it for a couple minutes or something, but when you're addicted to something, you're stuck with it. So what do I mean by that, right? So for example, in my life, I've been called addicted to video games many times. A lot of people would tell me different things, like, oh, you'll probably never get a girlfriend, or you'll probably never get a life. You'll never be able to hold down a job, this and that. Everyone's wrong. I was able to do all those things. I got married. I'm still married today. I had a job. Of course, I left it because of other situations, but I had a job where I was getting promoted, and I was like very prominent in it, and I wasn't like being absent or anything because of gaming. As a matter of fact, the job became more important to me than gaming, so far to the point where like I only played the only game I would play would be Destiny, because I had people to play with, but I would stop playing everything else. So there's different ways that you have to see why it is that something affects somebody, right? Because a lot, and as I was saying earlier in the podcast, like before you go ahead and label somebody as addicted, you have to see what it is that they're doing and why. Because you might say something that a person's addicted, and they might consider themselves addicted, and they'll go ahead and stop and start trying to resolve something that isn't the actual case. And what do I mean by that? So now that Mike's back, I can say this little story. So let's talk about addiction. My family is.
I don't want to interrupt the flow where you took the podcast or anything. It's just my bad, guys. I literally could not hold it anymore. It was too much. But we're actually wait. Something else. Okay. Literally, Jordan, I'm gonna smack you. Literally, we've only been live for 58 minutes, not something else. What I was gonna say, real quick. Sorry to interrupt the flow, guys. I know. I'll try not to do it again. So yeah, helps you make friends.
yeah, of course. We were there. So we moved over to the addiction now. So.
No, I'm sorry. Wait, I had something that I wanted to bring up with that. But okay, I guess just a quick summary, Sorry to interrupt again. I really didn't mean to cut you off there.
It's fine.
But it's just here, I'll help you set it up again. Watch. So, games ultimately really it could really have a lot of, positive things. That's all I was trying to say. Whether it's escaping from the problems that you might be having in the day-to-day, as long as you do it responsibly, or, you're going ahead and you're using it to express yourself in the type of game that you're playing, how you're choosing to play it, or, you're teaching yourself a skill, or you're teaching yourself resilience by challenging yourself and growing out of your comfort zone, or if it's just by actually helping you socialize, which is something that's really healthy too. Having friends, like literally one of the biggest things that's recommended to you when you have depression and all that is talking to your friends, reaching out to your friends, even though it's hard or you feel like you might want to isolate. Your brain might always want to do something that's not the healthiest for it. So it could really be a beneficial tool. But just as it could be a beneficial tool, just as much as it could be a beneficial tool, when taken to an extreme via addiction, it could actually be a really problematic thing, which I think is what you were going to talk about, that you might have some experiences or some issues with video game addiction that you wanted to talk about or whatever.
I have some story to share. I mean, I guess I'll start with myself, because I'm a guy that believes in humility, and I don't feel like I'm better than anyone else, and I have issues the same as anyone else. So I'll start with myself, and I'll put myself out there, right? Like I was saying while you were gone that I've been told that I wasn't gonna get a girlfriend, and that I wasn't gonna be able to hold down a job, and I wasn't gonna be able to move up in life. Turns out they were wrong. The first time I got a job, I excelled in it, and I got promoted, as you saw. you were my manager, so you clearly saw my progress. I went from not having a girlfriend to being married within the same year. And then, I got a car, but I was actually fortunate enough to be able to acquire my own car with my wife, like no help from parents or anything. And I'm still paying it off to this day, despite the fact that, I had the unfortunate demise of getting fired. And the fact that I flipped jobs from where I was at to something else is because of a totally different reason. It was actually because I was getting abused at the job I was at versus, me being incapable of keeping up with things, because no one in their right mind would have kept me on hand for 2 years and employed if I was a bad employee, right? I was clearly good. I was showing up. Like literally games. Despite the fact that I love games for my entire life, I was able to put it aside and focus on my job.
So people in general were really saying that you were going to amount to no good. Is that like, people that bullied you in school, or is that like,
no, it's just
peers, friends, family?
Peers, friends, and family, all that stuff, right? And that's something I want to talk about, because a lot of times, like, people are very, and I know for myself, are very influenced by family. I know, for example, I don't mean to be putting it like that, but like I said, I have the classic stereotype of a Latino mom and Latino family, where they're just like, oh no, this has to be this way, or everything's wrong, and they yell at you when you're wrong and stuff like that, and speaking at the top of their lungs. So for example, one of them was gaming. They don't believe in gaming. They said, oh, this is garbage. It's going to be a waste of your time. And as soon as I got married, my wife is from, the South, Venezuela. So her parents come from that culture too. And it's exactly the same. It's games don't mean anything. They make you addicted. It's all an addiction. It shouldn't be done. It's like, it's no different than watching Netflix or anything else. It just depends on how you take it, right?
Well, funnily enough, that's not even a mentality that's uniquely like Hispanic or anything like that.
No,
I know for
course.
a fact, one of the streamers I like watching, who's Harris Heller, one of the biggest obstacles he had to getting into streaming, which is, while playing games, was that his wife actually was completely against gaming. And, she's actually like just I think they're just Caucasian. Like,
right. When I was saying stereotype, I wasn't saying necessarily the hatred of gaming or whatever. I was saying stereotype of the fact that, the whole
the stigma, like that. No, they kind of have like that stigma.
They have that stigma, but that's not what I'm saying. The stereotype is like being, the Latino mom that you see, like that's always like yelling at the top of her lungs, and you see on memes on Instagram and stuff. And yeah, it's just like I have that, right? Every kid that has a Latino mom or aunt or something knows that, when something doesn't go their way, the first reaction is going to be yelling at the top of their lungs.
That's a little bit of a stereotype, but
it is. That's why I said.
Seen.
That's what I'm saying. It's a stereotype.
You commonly see. I know my mom's the same way for sure.
Yeah, that's why I said it's a stereotype. But because I'm trying to make it funny. But the point is, it's just I have a little bit of that where the family doesn't support it and stuff, and they consider it an addiction, right? Despite the fact that now through the psychologist we're learning that it's not an addiction; it's a coping mechanism, right? So the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I've been told at my face that literally because of this addiction, I will never be able to grow up or do anything or aspire to anything.
And then you've kind of proven that.
And I've proven it wrong before. The only thing that hurt me in the process was, again, life was working against me. I married someone that was great, but did not believe in the gaming. So, they started, slowly like undercutting it. Then my family, again, 2 years later, they're bringing it back up. And then, of course, I got into a different job, rushing into something I didn't know I was getting into, and I ended up getting fired for it because I got something that was outside my skill set.
Has there actually ever been a time where negative has been detrimental to you?
Yeah, of course, many times. I mean,
why don't you let us know a couple? Because ultimately, I mean,
well, look,
it's interesting to see that sometimes video game addiction isn't what could actually be damaging, but sometimes it could just be the outside.
I'm gonna bring a perfect example, right? So this mentality is not just for me; it's for everyone they interact with. I guess it's not even just. It's just them as people. They're very judgmental. Like some of my family members are very judgmental and very imposing on their thoughts. So I want to bring up the story of a cousin I have through my wife now, like her cousin that for me is a cousin too now, which I resonate with him because he likes gaming, but also because he's a pretty lighthearted kid. He likes jokes and stuff, and I don't mean to be putting him out there, but he has some issues I believe it's some form of autism that he has. That kind of gives him like a learning disability in a sense. Like it kind of makes him, or like learning. I mean, he just struggles with it sometimes. It's not saying that he can't do it. He has to do it a different way than everyone else, right? It's not just as simple as I heard it, I learned it.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that, right? But when I went over there to New York the first time, because they live in New York, I went with my wife and stuff, and my wife and the kid's sister and the kid's mom and the kid's dad. Well, the kid's dad not really so much, but the mom. They're all sat down with him. I would yell at him and stuff in classic fashion as they would, because that's their nature, due to the culture they're raised in. They would just yell at him because he wouldn't do his homework. They would blame, oh, it's all because you want to play games and because you're addicted and you're not going to play games unless you finish your homework, and we're not going to let you touch the console and stuff, and we're not going to buy you games. And they would just like constantly put this kid in a situation of stress where it's like, oh, if I have fun, it's bad, right? I sat down with a kid, and within 30 minutes, he finished his assignment. Whereas they took 4 hours to do this homework with him, it took me 30 minutes an hour. Simply because I sat down, I spoke to him calmly without yelling, and I asked him how he felt about the assignment. The second day, the same thing happened. He struggled with it. He started it on his own, and then he started, like kind of crying because people were yelling at him and stuff. And I sat down next to him. I was like, "Why are you crying?" And he goes like, "Oh, I'm crying because I don't understand the material." And I was like, "But don't cry, because you're only gonna waste your time." And then he sucked it up, whatever. He cleaned up his tears, and I helped him out, and I sat with the homework again, and I asked him, "What do you see?" And he says, I don't understand the homework. And then he would start writing, but like he would write the letters like incorrectly. And I thought, okay, well, hold on a sec. He might have dyslexia. So I slowed down again. I had him rewrite the entire assignment again, and then he got it correctly, right? After I leave, the problem started happening again. Of course, I wasn't there to help him with his homework. I started yelling at him again. He started crying. He started feeling bad. Turns out, kid was blind. He needed glasses. He couldn't read. He couldn't read right. He didn't want to do the homework because he felt bad. He wanted to play games because he wanted to get rid of his pains. And this addiction, it's not an addiction, is that he's trying to escape his problems. And when you realize that he was blind and they fixed that problem, all of a sudden he's a straight A student. He's getting all his homework done in time. No problem, no question. Oh, okay, I'll finish my homework. No help needed. So this family is constantly indoctrinating this kid. You're addicted. You have problems. You have this and that. You're making the kid feel bad. And the kid, he literally told me, I feel stupid. It's like, no, you're not stupid, bro. You just got to slow down and take your time learning the stuff. It's just different. But at the end of the day, it wasn't his issue. It wasn't the fact that he was autistic. It wasn't the fact that he was addicted to gaming. It was simply the fact that the kid just couldn't see well. He needed glasses. You know what I'm saying?
That's not necessarily, well, that's exactly that. Though.
What I'm talking about is incorrectly diagnosing somebody as something when it's not right. They were calling him addicted, and he was not addicted at all. He was
because
simply
of the
just
stigma
escaping.
That they have of video games.
Exactly, and he was doing it for escapism, which is a coping mechanism. I want to talk about addiction and coping mechanism because they're both right there and they're skirting the line, obviously. But we really have to dig down to it because, again, this kid was called addicted his entire life and totally he has problems. But at the end of the day, all his issue was he was blind and he was just escaping. He was using games as a coping mechanism to get rid of the stresses because he felt good. But even in the games, I would watch him play and he would completely disregard and miss tutorials. I mean, you could say maybe the TV was small, but that's not the case. It was the fact that he can't read. He was blind, so he couldn't see the instructions in the game, and he would give up at the games too. And it's like, okay, you're telling me he's addicted to games, but he's giving up at playing the games too because he can't understand them. And it's because, again, this issue that he has.
That's an outside issue, and it was being misdiagnosed as an addiction to games.
Exactly,
because of the fact
but because of the stigma, they're constantly abusing him as this, and they're indoctrinating him and telling him that he's this and making him feel bad. I'm telling this for all kinds of people out there, parents, brothers, family members, friends, all that stuff. Like, just be mindful of how you're doing because a lot of times it may not be the way you think it is. It's always, put yourself in their shoes. How do they see it? And that's the kind of person I am. I like to think on what the other person's feeling. So, I sat down and I tried to understand what it was, and I knew, hold on, there's something wrong here, but it's not what they're saying. There's clearly something else. And people would fight me. I would defend this kid. I'm telling you, I would defend this kid against his grandparents, against his uncles and aunts, and everybody would just say he's addicted. And lo and behold, I was right. The kid simply just had a problem with his vision that was preventing him from being able to progress normal. And because I actually sat down with the kid and helped him out, he loves me. He gives me hugs. He says hi to me. Like everyone else, he just ignores. I mean, he is a little bit of an introvert, but like with me, he doesn't ignore me. He says hi, whatever, not because it's like a common ground of respect. I sat down with the kid. I actually listened to his pains and try to discover something which no one else does. I know a lot of times, especially, and this isn't me talking about kids because I myself resonate with this. When you're an adult and you look at a kid, like a lot of times you disregard what they say because they're young, they don't have experience, so you might not think much on their opinion, but sit down and listen. I mean, it's your freaking kid, right? You're supposed to love them and cherish them. So it's like you take your time to listen to what they're trying to say. And a lot of times they may not be saying it the way that you would understand, but they're saying something very real and you have to try and understand it through a different type of lens. So that's just one type of story that I wanted to share about, addiction and being mixed diagnosed.
I think it is important. That actually is pretty interesting because I think it's pretty important to recognize when something's an addiction and when it's not. And yeah, that dichotomy that you were setting up about a coping mechanism versus an actual addiction is actually something that's really important too. Because if you're just going to say that if someone doing any activity for a moderate amount of time that you don't agree with is an addiction, when it isn't, it can actually be damaging, because at that point maybe you're just trying to change something that a person fundamentally likes. Like, you're trying to fundamentally change something about a person which you shouldn't be, and that could actually be more damaging, especially if you're ignoring a different problem in light of you swearing that it's an addiction. You know, like, for example, if this kid, obviously I know he's young, so it's not going to be the best comparison, but let's, you know, put him as an adult or whatever. If he spent the same amount playing games, or the same amount of times playing games, and then not having success in school or whatever, as he did, like, I don't know, drinking or going to the gym, or, you know, going out and shopping or whatever, or hanging out with friends, or spending the time with their families just talking, would that then be seen as an addiction as well? Or would those things be to blame for the poor academic performance? I don't necessarily think so. I think it's just because of the fact that they're, you know, a big thing of what happens is, it sounds like a lot of the people that you're referring to or talking about don't actually even play games themselves. If I don't know if that's correct or not. So a big thing with humans too is that we just end up fearing the unknown a lot of the times. You know, like, if I tell you that I don't necessarily know if I'd be comfortable with, like, let's say we discover time travel, I'm not going to go ahead and be the first person to volunteer myself to do that, because I don't know what the hell is going to happen if I decide to go and time travel. You know what I mean? And that's something that's scary to me. The fact that I don't know what's going to happen is scary, even though maybe we just found the science and it checks out and it's supposed to be okay and it's just great. I'm still not going to take that risk just because I don't know that, and I don't feel comfortable taking your word for it. You know what I mean? That's probably the same case that's happening here, is that since they don't game, they just kind of hear other people's opinions about it who also don't game. And I think that when you don't know something, your opinion about something is more likely to be a negative one. Because how can I put it? It's sort of like, it's a funny expression that my girlfriend always says, which is that you can always add more, but you can't take away. That's only true in certain contexts, right? Like, obviously in mathematics, like subtraction's a thing or whatever. But what I mean by that is, let's say if I was to administer a medication to you, right, at a proper dose, or like, let's say I gave you too little, right? So I gave you too little insulin. Your sugar isn't going to drop to what it is. Let's say you're a diabetic, you need insulin. I go ahead and inject you with it. It only goes down a little bit. It's still on a dangerous level. Obviously, that's pretty bad. But I could always give you a little bit more, and then it'll go down a little bit more, and then I could just keep giving it to you until it gets to the proper levels, right, of glucose. What happens if I give you too much insulin? I can't really take that out anymore. You know what I mean? So I would rather either not give somebody any insulin, or I would rather give them very little, like less than what they need, in comparison to just, oh, here, take the insulin. And that's kind of the same thing I think that's happening with some people. Is like, oh, I don't know about gaming, so you shouldn't play it at all because it might hook you and you'll get addicted. And oh, if you even do it for an hour, you have an addiction. But that's kind of, I kind of want to digress from that. But I think it is important to recognize what an addiction actually looks like. So, you know, parents or friends or family not understanding like what an addiction actually looks like, and then just kind of throwing the stigma on people. You know, like, I don't know, like, let's say if you, well, that's just a perfect example. So if you know, now we got that out of the way, well, we know what an addiction doesn't look like. I think it's important to define that the video game addiction properly actually does look like, or any addiction really, is just when you're not able to willfully stop doing it. And it's detrimental to your life
basically just to
add, or your health.
Just to add to what you're saying is essentially, like, for example, a smoker becomes addicted no matter what, because the nicotine gets stuck in your lungs and it's just going to keep requesting more, right? No matter what. And even if you want to stop, you just can't. I mean, I remember my sales manager at my previous occupation, you know, literally, like, he would be breathing like heaving, like I gotta quit smoking. And then he'd go out and smoke like 3 more packs, you know, and an entire day he would have like 2 packs in his like drawer because he literally needed to smoke. He couldn't stop no matter what. And he's like, I can't, even if I wanted to, I can't stop. Like, he's literally said it, but he doesn't care. He just keeps smoking. Obviously, you know, you do what keeps your stress low. And of course that job was very stressful. As it was for me, it is for him too. So I could imagine that, of course, to get rid of his stress, he would do his addiction, right? But that's the thing, right? Like, for example, I've been told addicted, right? that gaming makes me addicted, but a lot of times, especially yesterday, for example, I started YouTube off of walkthroughs, and the first thing I did was not play any games, which is what I need to do to make use of my YouTube content. Then when I turned on a game, I got a game that had nothing to do with my YouTube because I'm not recording my PS3, I'm recording my PS5. So again, I can't record the content. And then while I was playing the game, every two missions, I would just stop, look at my phone, and waste 30 minutes and not play the game at all. So a game that was like 4 hours long took me like 8 to 10 hours to beat because I was distracted half the time. Because again, it's like, despite the fact that I want to play, my own personal issues are preventing from that. And that's also me wanting to say, like, yeah, sure, sometimes games are escapism, but sometimes they're not enough. So it's like, it may seem I'm addicted because I'm trying to force myself to try and enjoy something for the sake of doing something, not to worry about my depression or anxiety or whatever. And then in doing so, I get frustrated because I can't complete what I'm trying to do because I'm
I would say
issues. You know what I'm saying?
A telltale sign of actually not being addicted. Now,
exactly.
I would have to probably consult someone. I'm not a psychologist by any means, so like, don't take what I say at face value.
No, of course.
But I would say if you're trying to force yourself to do something, that's actually probably a clear sign that maybe you aren't really enjoying that thing very much at the moment, or that you're just straight up not addicted. Like, for example, if I'm trying to, I don't know if you could call me a workaholic if I have to constantly try to like literally focus myself on trying to work and doing things like that. I can't successfully pull it off for more than 2 hours at a time.
Right. I mean, I'm not saying I understand where you're coming from, but I'm not saying that. Like when I say like force yourself, I'm saying I force myself to do something to prevent myself from doing nothing at all. Period. If that makes sense.
Like you're trying to be productive.
Yeah. Like sometimes like I don't want to do laundry, but I force myself to do laundry for the sake of not sitting there and staring at the wall, which is what depression does. It forces you to feel like you can't do anything. So again, I force myself to play games and I force myself to do laundry or do my homework and stuff because not only do I have to do them, the laundry and the homework, it's something that if I just literally let myself be overcome by that, I lose, right? But then the one I do it the most with is gaming because I love gaming. So in doing so, it makes it seem like I'm addicted to it. But at the end of the day, if you observe me, like the amount of times I come into obstacles where I just give up and like just don't want to do anything, or I leave the controller on pause and I just I avoid coming back to the game sometimes because I'm not in it right now. That just shows to me, or shows to anyone, that I'm not really addicted.
Well,
right?
If you want, I could actually ask you a few questions about that, but I actually want to go ahead and finish describing it or defining it, because we're not doing that. We keep giving a negative definition of it, which is just like, or the anti-definition of it, which is we say what it doesn't look like, but we should talk about what it does look like as well. Which, to me, a gaming addiction would be very much that you feel like you're compelled to game. Like, you feel like, you get home, you don't want to do your homework, you don't want to do this or that, you just straight up want to game. You refuse to maybe take care of your hygiene because you just want to play a game. You don't maybe nearly even want to go to the restroom because you want to play a game. You don't want to go see your friends because you want to play a game.
That reminds me of the story of the dude that literally created a porta potty within his room so he could just keep gaming for like 72 hours straight. And then like after eating like Cheetos and pooping himself and stuff and all that within the same chair, he just kind of like he just went on his merry way. Like his soul, he
passed away.
Yeah, because he literally didn't stand up, so all his blood coagulated and stuff, and then like the blood vessels just. I got clogged.
That's
called addiction. Exactly.
That is definitely addiction. That is literally like the perfect summary for what gaming addiction
is. That reminds me of the dude that's just literally like he created a toilet chair so he could just sit in front of the TV with bags of Cheetos and his thing, so he didn't have to get up to get food or whatever.
Obviously, those are like super extremes of addiction, but it doesn't
extreme for everything.
Have to make it that far. I actually can recognize that I've had bouts of gaming addiction in the past before, or like. Okay, so maybe it was gaming addiction, or maybe it wasn't. I don't know if like for something to be considered addiction, I'm not sure if it's also required for it to be chronic, because I've never had it where like I've had like a whole year that I would just be like, oh, I need to play games or whatever. But like let's say if I got really hooked. I remember, for example, when I fell in love with Knights of the Old Republic back on the Xbox. Sometimes I would grab it. And
yeah, I mean,
from Friday when I got back from school all the way through Sunday, I would not. I mean, it's kind of gross to think about it, but this has been already like 10, 15 years or whatever at this point. I would grab the game, not let it go, not shower, barely go to the restroom, barely eat. Like sometimes I would get a headache from not like moving from my chair, and I would just straight up play the game and just play the game.
I mean, there's times I
can totally recognize that definitely had a lot of the telltale marks of addiction. And I've had moments where it has adversely affected me. Obviously, there's like the basic stuff like headaches from not eating, or getting dehydrated and
that's
stuff.
Essentially, but the thing is again, it's the telltale signs of addiction, but it's essentially binging. Because at the end of the day, once you beat the game, what happened? You stopped doing all out weekends of just doing that, right? You just kind of went back to the
that
flow.
Game's very long. I spent many days doing stuff like that.
Of course.
And
40 hours,
I
a 40 hour
put it
game.
down, and that's definitely not a healthy amount to
course,
do that.
I agree.
Like it's definitely not healthy for you to sit down and just watch a Netflix show.
No, of course. Like binging
day.
anything is bad. If I drink 50 bottles of water without relieving myself, I'm just gonna that's again going to the thing we were saying, where you do too much of something, and it's always going to be detrimental.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think an addiction requires for you to like do it, all the time, 24/7. That's the thing. A worse kind of addiction.
When I spoke about it with my psychologist, addiction is basically you literally cannot do anything else. Like your body does not let you. You are stuck
within those 3 to 4 days.
No, yeah,
that's
that's how binging works. But addiction is you'd be basically stuck, and you would but you'd be stuck past the 4 days. As soon as you beat it, you went back to the flow of regular stuff. But if you're addicted, you'd essentially go 5, 6, 7, and then 10, 20, 30, and you'd be stuck there. Period. Like you can't stop it at all. That's what addiction is. What you're describing to me is binging, which is kind of like, yeah, sure, it's like. Ice cream is very addicting, and I might gorge myself on a bucket or two one day, but I'm not going to constantly...
Let's say people who are addicted to food, they're not... Like, you're not eating 24/7. You're eating a lot more than you should, a lot more times in a day, but it's not like you're just glued to eating because you would literally just implode or fall into a coma or whatever from ingesting all the food. There's people who make it to 600, 700, 800 pounds, and it's because they're ingesting multiple thousands of calories in a day and not really exercising and stuff. But it's not like they just strap a tube to their mouth and they're having someone chuck in burgers on the other side. I understand where you're coming from,
but it's kind of like, okay, essentially with smoking, right? Like you don't just smoke 4 days and then decide, oh, you know what, I'm done with it, right? Addiction is something where you're stuck with it, and by stuck with it, I'm not saying like you're doing it 24/7. Like it sticks with you forever. Like you constantly, you need to do it. Like for example,
you can break addictions and stuff too. So the thing that I'm thinking is that I've had bouts of video game addiction, and there is a compulsory side to gaming, and my gaming addiction by far isn't the worst, but I could recognize that there's times where I've been compelled to game more than I really should have, or really allowed myself to, or in an unhealthy fashion. A lot of the times I tried skipping school just to play games and stuff like that. And
but you also have to think about like, how'd you feel at school too? Did it make you feel bad, right? Because I didn't start trying to skip school until my mom took me from my elementary school where I was being an A student to a school where I was dealing with bullies and stuff down in Homestead, right? That's when I started like, oh man, I don't even want to go to school. When I was in elementary, like the first 3 years, I was like, giving awards, and I was a straight A student, and the teachers knew me, and I had friends. And then when I go to start making new friends, these new guys are more, I don't know, they're just, sort of bullies here. They didn't like me. I was a nice outsider. The teachers were like meaner. So then I started wanting to just stay home and not go to school, right? So I mean, you also have to think about like if you're skipping school because it feels better, then you also have to think about too like,
I don't think you can say that though, because just because something feels better doesn't mean that it relieves it from being an addiction. For example, if you suffer a traumatic injury and now you take opiates to help you manage your pain, and it does feel better, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not addictive, or that there isn't negative aspects for you doing that. If you go ahead and actually start avoiding school to stay home and play games, as horrible as dealing with bullying and stuff is, and obviously you're going to want to cope with that situation and everything like that, there is an extremely bad downside to not showing up to school, which is that you're actually actively missing out on your education. I'm of the agreement that not everything that you learn in school is useful, especially here where it seems like in college and stuff, a lot of things get inflated just for you to pay more out of your pocket. I think that the earlier years of your education are extremely formative and are actually really important to your development as a human being. Like we take some of this stuff for granted, but not being able to read or being illiterate is actually, really bad. And it could have really negative impacts on your life, and also not knowing basic math and stuff like that. So while I think it's, it's heartbreaking that you had to, try to stay home to play games to just avoid the negative feelings of being bullied in school and stuff. You know, the fact, I mean, obviously, I don't think that necessarily
what I'm getting at is, again, with the story I was telling you about the kid, is like, as a kid, you can't really tell the difference, right? You don't know any of these things. You don't feel that way. You just understand that, man, I feel bad going to school, but I really love gaming. So you, as a kid, this kid is the simplest form of understanding. It's just, you just gravitate towards whatever makes you feel good. As adults, we do the same. We just have, you know, different measures to like help us deal with some of the things that are kind of sucky at the times, you know, like work or whatever.
But it's really like, I mean, I'm sure I don't know if you've had this, so you know, you let me know if that's the case or not. But I personally, in my experiences, I've been able to identify when I'm being overly compelled to actually play, or whether I'm just doing it for my own pleasure and measuring it, and then like stopping myself when I really want to. You know, when I'm actively choosing to. I mean, obviously, you have to choose to engage in playing video games, but at some point, like, I've also had certain games that have just, you know, sucked me in and then refused to let me go, and I don't think. But I have a hard time saying that isn't addiction.
But it's what I'm saying. Like, right, like you could consider binging a form of addiction, but like I said, an addiction is something that no matter what, even when you've like had your fill of it, you kind of just keep going, right? If that makes any sense. So like, for example, a person, I know that sometimes on a good day, like a steak and shake burger, like I'll swallow it like I've never had food in my life. Like I don't even stop to breathe. Like I'm just constantly chewing on that meat because I just really love it, right? But same thing with a game, you know, like God of War hit me, and it's like 4 hours flew by, and I was like, "Holy crap! Wow!" Like 4 hours flew by, right? But at the end of the day, I'm not addicted to it because I stopped. You know, eventually I went to sleep. Eventually I got up to go to the bathroom.
I don't think that's accurate, though. I don't think that's accurate, because you're just allowing for the only definition of game addiction to be those examples of people building a bathroom in their room and then just gaming constantly until they die.
It doesn't have to go that far either. Like, for example, like it's just as simple as what I explained with smoking, right? Like no matter what, you just can't stop smoking. Even if you smoke one cigarette a day, you're still addicted to it. You're still doing it every day. Even if you want to stop, it's hard to stop, right? The addiction basically has to be, because again, I'm trying to define the line. It's very hard to skirt the line, because at one point you have to deal. It's like, okay, what were the situations around it? Where like, was everything okay and you just did it to do it, or was something worse that made you just feel that better? That's what I'm saying. We always gravitate to what feels good.
If you're bullied and the avenue you decide to go through is you start doing cocaine, you start doing heroin or whatever.
Right,
that's still not.
But this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. The addiction starts when the bullying stops, but you still keep going. You understand what I'm saying? So, for example, if I start doing cocaine to do drugs and get myself high because I'm getting bullied by a bunch of people on the streets, right? But then they disappear off the road and I stop getting bullied, but I'm still doing it because in my mind I'm still getting bullied. You know, I'm up here still.
Well,
that's
at
addiction.
That point, you're just wanting to do the drugs to do the drugs.
Exactly, but that's addiction.
Even if the bullies, even if you were still bullied, you would not find a single person who would tell you you're not addicted to heroin. Like, it's not just because like you're dealing with bad stuff, you're suddenly not having an addiction.
Right.
The addiction is literally just that compulsion to do the one thing despite, like, you know,
right, but then
whatever.
That's where it skirts the line. That's where it skirts the line, because if you're compulsory to do something is because something else is making you feel bad, then it's called a coping mechanism. You see the difference? That's why I'm bringing up both topics.
It can't just be that, though, because you could cope with drugs, but you'd still have an addiction to them. You could cope with video games, and you could still have an addiction to them.
If I smoke every day to reduce my stress and anxiety because of work, right? But one day I stop working and I don't have that stress anymore, right? And I continue to smoke, I'm addicted. But if my smoking stops, then it was because of the stress. You see the difference? In one case, you're constantly doing it because your body compels you to. In another case, you're only doing it because of an outside factor. And as soon as that outside factor disappears, you no longer feel the need to do that. If that makes sense.
But it would still count. It has to count as an addiction. It's still in the field of addiction.
That's the fine line of it, right? Whereas I'm going to two different psychologists. I have one for my couples therapy and one for my own, right? One says I'm addicted because I'm playing due to the fact that I'm stressed. The other person calls it a coping mechanism. And you have to really define what it is, because again, if you consider yourself addicted, where you're only really considering it, where you're only doing it because you're stressed or something, then you're not going to find out that the reason why you're doing it is because you're stressed, and you're going to continue living through the stress.
I know for a fact I've done it because of stress. I know for a fact I've done it not because of stress. So personally, I know I've had bouts of gaming addiction, and it's come and gone. You know, obviously you learn to manage it. Like obviously, you know, my grades starts to slip, I would focus on my grades, or if I wanted to get in shape, I would start exercising, this and that. But for sure, I've known, I've experienced it. And then especially if like I have like a really bad time, or you know, I've abstained from playing games for a while. Sometimes I've been known to also just, you know, go real ham, like, oh, I'll have work in an hour, I'm still gonna play, you know, whatever, screw sleep and all that. So for a fact, I can recognize I've struggled with it, and you know, there's been a couple of times where it's had negative consequences for me. Like, you know, back I had a relationship that I was in back in like 2015, 2016 that, you know, unfortunately ended up being kind of a toxic one, and I was definitely not in a good place mentally. Partially a lot because of how, you know, my home situation was in. How my home situation was, which was we were living, you know, 5 people in a very cramped apartment and didn't have my own room, lacked privacy. My family was very toxic, always arguing, and then there's always been like a big thing with like mental issues and stuff with my parents and my grandparents and my brother and all that. And so, you know, I was having a hard time with that. You know, the relationship was on and off, so I was kind of struggling with that too. And then, you know, I've been dealing with depression since I was about 12 years old, so I still had that going on at that time too. And it was just a bunch of stuff. And on top of the fact that my inexperience with relationships didn't really allow me to communicate with my partner at the time very well, and all the other issues that I was carrying as baggage, which obviously contributed to the ultimate doom of that relationship, you know, video game addiction kind of had a stake in that too, because I noticed a lot of the times I wouldn't choose to try to work through things with my partner, things of that nature. Sometimes I would just straight up sit down and try to play Overwatch or something like that. And I literally remember the worst case of it was when I literally sat down and played Overwatch for nearly 24 hours. My partner went to bed without me, which I think is not really a healthy thing to do in a relationship. Woke up, went to work, still saw me playing, and I barely even acknowledged her on her way out playing Overwatch.
Right, but
very clearly a sign of addiction. And even if I was using it to cope with all the other bad stuff in my life,
and there was some pretty bad stuff.
It's still an addiction.
But look, I'm gonna pull up the definition. Essentially, addiction is like the fact or condition of being addicted to a particular substance, thing, or activity, right? But then as you go deeper into it, it's essentially caused by compulsive use to the point of like it damages you personally, like health wise, relationship wise, jobs, and other parts of normal life, but consistently, right? And then essentially the example that they give is you're literally doing stuff out of your way to ensure that necessity or compulsion is met. So for example, if I'm addicted to drugs and I go out of my way to rob a bank or rob a store to get money to buy drugs, I'm extremely addicted. If that makes sense. But if you go out of your way, to tell your girlfriend like, "Hey, F off, I'm gonna play games," and you just sit down and play games, that's addiction. But if you get stuck on something, and then you know she leaves to sleep, but then you're still there, it's because again you're trying to relieve all that stress. And again, you have to really think about it, because at that time you had a pretty bad job. You're you know, as you said, the relationship ended poorly, so I'm assuming that the relationship was pretty bad in the first place. So even talking to her might have been a pain.
It degrades, and I know for a fact that my gaming was a big part of that.
And that's what I'm saying.
I feel like you're being a little defensive in trying to say what gaming addiction is, because it's almost like you're trying to poise it in a thing where it has to be like in its most extreme form. But you know, an addiction can be on and off too. You know, there's people who struggle with sobriety, who maybe they've gone to AA meetings and they've taken time off, but then, you know, they can relapse and they have the same bad issue. And
I agree.
And you don't necessarily have to go to the extreme of robbing banks or anything to do something, because I've known people who, even though like weed isn't physically addictive, they'll develop a dependency on it, an emotional dependency on it, and they'll have to smoke it all the time too. Right. So I don't think that addiction has to go to the extremes that you're trying to paint it out to have.
What I'm trying to say is, and the reason why I'm trying to say is because if everyone, again, it goes off of the thing I was saying, if you misdiagnose it incorrectly and consider it one thing, you don't get to the root cause, right? So for example, I know the worse somebody feels, the more likely or prone they are to start something like drugs or issues that make them addicted, right? And it's just how it is. Like at that point, like the type of struggles that you were going through, as far as I remember, are literally the kind of points that I get to when I just want to vomit off of the stress that I have. And those are the points where I get stuck. Like when I'm at that low point is when I get stuck playing games for 24 hours straight, like the way that you did. But when I'm relieved from that stress, I don't do 24 hours. I only do it when I get to that bad of a case. You understand what I'm getting at now?
That's true. But
I just want to make sure that I want to define it in a way where I understand where both sides are coming from, but I want people to be able to what I want to accomplish with this episode is I want to make sure that people are able to make that distinction properly, because at the end of the day, you might consider something an addiction, and it actually isn't. It's something else.
But I think the opposite's going on, where you're thinking that there has to be no, like, for there to be an addiction, there basically has to be no negative influence or reason for someone to want to do it. Whereas you could very much just go ahead and develop a heroin addiction for the hell of it. You don't have to have anything bad going on in your life.
I'm explaining
and you just want to do it for the thrill.
I'm explaining it based off of what you're saying, though. Because, okay, for example, the culture thing, okay, I understand why that could be an addiction. But the one where you said with your girlfriend, that I don't consider that an addiction. I consider that you trying to escape the worst problem.
Definitely addiction, man. The definition said it right there. If you do it at the cost of something that's detrimental to your health, your relationships, and stuff like that, ultimately, my understanding of it is, something that you do as a couple, if you live with your partner or whatever. In my opinion, I'm not a relationship specialist or a psychologist, but if you're not going to sleep with your partner when you live with them, right, that could be a very bad thing, because it's like an intimate moment.
I understand where you're coming from, because my wife
being in bed with them, and you're supposed to kind of share that with them daily. Like, even like, let's say someone like Harris Heller, who was on the grind for a long time bringing up his YouTube channel. He was working so many hours at his part-time job, and then he was working on top of that like an extra 12 hours filming and editing YouTube videos every day. He said, like, obviously he couldn't spend that much time with his wife because he was making sure that he could get his business off the ground. But he said he made damn sure that one arm was on his laptop editing while he was in bed and petting his girlfriend or his wife to sleep at the same time. You get me?
No, I understand. I understand where you're coming from.
I missed that big part of it, and it wasn't. It nearly felt like it wasn't a choice. It was a choice ultimately, because it was a choice. But I felt compelled to have to stay on Overwatch and keep playing it, and that was very clearly something that hurt her, that concerned her, and that to me is distinct of being
now I understand where you're coming from, but again, you have to think about it, right? So, for example, I remember in the relationship specifically, and I don't want to say too much, because obviously I don't want to. If you're not comfortable, I don't want to say too much. But I remember specifically you mentioning a lot of times you had a lot of falling out with her that weren't anything to do with gaming at all, just simply you and her as a people living together. If you're having that kind of issue, it's going to deter you from even thinking about doing good things. I know in my wife, when she upsets the living daylights out of me, I do not want to go sleep with her at the same time. I do not even want to be in the same room. I don't even want to be in the same house half, right? Now, I don't mean to put her out there, but it's just common knowledge, right? When you get upset with somebody, that happens. And especially if you're living with them and you're constantly going through this bad emotion with them, at one point or another, you're going to get to a point where you're feeling so bad that whatever makes you feel good, you're going to want to keep doing it and not let it end. And that's where addiction is born from. But the fact that you were able to jump out of it 24 hours later is what keeps it from being an addiction, because an addiction is a problem where no matter what, you're stuck. And that's the definition of it.
But it can happen. It can happen on and off, though. So I don't think that's not part of the definition of it. I mean, it is, but like in a sense. But
the coping mechanism works exactly.
The coping mechanism didn't say that it has to be a permanent thing or whatever, because then no one at AA who's successful could be considered an addict, or that they ever were an addict because they broke it. And addiction can exist within the past, and addiction can exist within a moment. And addiction is obviously mostly always going to be chronic, or it's going to be on and off.
Let me see how I can explain it. Right, all right. So let's say somebody drinks for 24 hours, whatever. They just get drunk and they black out drunk, right? And an addiction person does the same thing, right? The following day, if I put beer or liquor in front of both of them, the addicted person is not going to be incapable of stopping themselves, and they're going to grab it. Whereas the person who blacked out is like, damn, that felt bad, I'm done. That's the difference. You see there? Mm-hmm. Do you see the difference? The reason why AA meetings exist is because it's about helping people overcome that addiction. Whereas a person who has an issue, like a momentary issue where it seems like an addiction, doesn't need that, because they're able to stop, right? If I sat you in front of Overwatch again, you're not going to play 24 hours again. You're going to be like, damn, I'm bored as hell. I can't handle this. The reason why you were able to go that far is because you were just feeling that bad at the moment that just it overcame that emotion.
Feeling bad though, actually, and that
Are you sure?
I wasn't angry at that time. I had no problems with her. Now I did have like personal stuff going on in my life.
I know you had the issue with the family and then the job too.
I was doing it out of sheer enjoyment. I was just playing Overwatch out of sheer enjoyment, and I did it past when I wanted to stop, and I couldn't stop.
But that's where addiction has come from, though. You're right. I'm not saying you're wrong. You're right. That's where addiction comes from. But again,
I don't think I have the worst video game addiction in the world, but I've had
moments. Of course, I've had moments where I wake up. I woke up sleep talking about like killing orcs on Lineage 2, the MMO, when I first started playing with Arnold, because the game. I would literally stay up until my eyes were like this as a kid. I was literally like, oh god, like I literally can't stay awake anymore, and then I would still continue playing. I understand where you're coming from. But the thing is, again, you have to think about the situation. For example, the time when I did that, my parents were going through the divorce. They were yelling at each other. My mom kept calling the cops on my dad. I would have to go bounce through the cops and stuff. And I was afraid of the next day, so I would try and stay awake and enjoy as much as I can. And yeah, I know you said you didn't have problems with your girlfriend. Again, I know for a fact you were having problems with your family because you moved out and obviously, financial struggles.
The relationship wasn't perfect, but just that specific day when I chose not
and you were working on
to go to sleep. Yeah, that was pretty bad.
And that job was pretty traumatizing.
People are always going to have problems in their life, and a lot of the people that have addictions are going to have demons that fuel them.
Of course.
Ultimately still doesn't,
That's how it all starts.
That doesn't make it not an addiction.
That's how it all starts. That's why you see it. That's why in the movies, hey, you want to get rid of your stress, and then they hand you a dime.
I have an underlying addiction that's managed, right? That's being managed, but I know that it's within me. I just manage it, and I'm not one right now. But I know that it's there for me to flip the switch, and at times I have been a video game addict. I personally, I don't know, your whole history that well, but I think there's been times where in the past I've recognized video game addiction within you. I'm not saying that you're even there now or that you're anywhere near that, but I remember, back in the day, obviously, the whole meme, where we would hang out, we would always be talking about games, or like, we went to your house and we'd be like, hey, Jordan, let's get some food or something, man. You'll be like, wait, bro, I gotta see the cutscene for Alan Wake 5 or whatever, you know what I mean? Or just stupid stuff like that.
That was also different because, again, you have to think about the situation. Like, we didn't have a car at the time. It was kind of hard to do it. And then my uncle was always like, bro, I'm gonna get you like the 50-cent hamburger from McDonald's. They're like, no, we want pizza. And it's like, he'd try to go for the cheapest thing. And then, we only had like a car, the clown car, which was 2-seater. So it was like one-stop shop to take each friend. And of course, the fact that, again, I didn't want to deal with having to go and, convince them to get pizza or whatever when my uncle just wanted to get the cheapest thing, So it's like, again, I'm avoiding dealing with problems by playing the game. That's how addiction starts. And of course, I could agree with anyone that, yeah, I did have some very addicting moments when I was younger. But I mean, I'm not now. I'm realizing now that more than anything, I'm using it for coping reasons.
No, I definitely think that right now you don't fit into that, especially, I don't think you've been doing it that often. And I know for a fact I haven't had any compulsory moments of just gaming. Like, there's been days where I've gamed for 24 hours recently. That's because I do like 24-hour charity streams on like my Twitch and stuff. And a lot of the times people notice I'm not like, the whole time I'm playing, by the time I hit the 10 hours left, 8 hours left, 6 hours left, I'm not like lively, like being like, yeah, bro, look at the game. Yeah, I'm very tired. I'm just forcing myself to do it for the sake of, doing something nice for charity and stuff like that, which is different. But there's been times where, the last and most recent memory, I think, was really just Injustice 2, where I was doing, I forget what it was. I think I was doing like all the trial modes or all the something. I was doing something specifically to unlock for each of the characters, and I stayed up like until the sun rose doing that for Injustice 2. And that was the last time. That was like what, like a couple years, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Yeah, that was the last time I did something addictive with the game.
But again, dude,
but it's like, definitely.
I understand where you're coming from, man. But it's like
it was an addiction. Even whether you want to acknowledge it or not, or if you're being defensive about it, because maybe you see yourself doing something like that, and you're like, oh, bro, no, I don't want to be able to be called an addict or something.
No, I totally agree, but it's just
it's definitely addiction.
You have to look at the environment.
Okay, I'm sorry, Jordan. If someone has a horrible life and they're doing heroin, like they have a heroin addiction,
that isn't
like, I'm not gonna say, yeah, bro, you're right. You're not an addict, dog. Like, keep it up. You're straight.
No, of course. The addiction. What I'm saying is the difference between coping mechanism and addiction is that once you remove the struggle that got you there in the first place, and you're still doing it, that's when you're stuck.
I disagree. I disagree. I think it's actually harmful that you're saying that, because you could be using your addictions as a coping mechanism, and it's not okay to say that it's not an addiction.
I agree.
You could have an addiction that is a coping mechanism, or it could be the coping, like the reason that you need to cope is the reason why you have the addiction. But to say that it isn't an addiction, or to say that there's a difference between coping, like, you shouldn't call this an addiction because it could be a coping mechanism, that's distinctly harmful. Like, if you recognize a pattern of addiction in video games in your life, you should try to change it. You should seek help with trying to change it.
I understand where you're coming from. I understand where you're coming from too. But the problem is that once you label something an addiction, it is an illness. No matter what. If you go to the point of illness, that's when you're in the real doo-doo situation. The reason why I'm saying it the way I'm saying it is because, again, it's like, if the only reason you're doing it is because the alternative is worse, then and then once that alternative that is worse is gone and you stop, then you're not really addicted. Addiction is something where you're, no matter what, against your own life, you are compelled, period.
No, I agree, but
and like, you're stuck.
Literally, the alternative that night for me, for example, was just going to bed and having it be a regular night and spending some time with my partner. I chose to stay on Overwatch, and I know you've agreed.
But think about it like this. Let me see if I can understand. Let me see if I can put it in a way. Essentially, your mind was like, it's just basically subconscious thinking. You didn't want to wake up the next day to have to go to PEC, if that makes sense.
No.
That's how it is for me. I mean, that's how it is for me. When I don't want to,
I was off. I literally just wanted to stay up.
Yeah, but your body doesn't think like that. My
body. If I could tell you what was going on in my mind, it was literally, yo, bro, oh my god, yeah, I got that sick kill. Let me go back and do some more. That was amazing. It feels good. I know that's what happens to me too. Like, when I used to go home from Office Depot, I would have a bad day, and a client would come in and it's like, I'm gonna sue you for ruining my laptop or whatever. You know, even though it's technically somebody else's fault. But like, you get. I personally would feel that pain. And then those were the days where, like, I would stay up till 5 a.m. and not sleep because it's like, I don't want to wake up the next day and go to work. I'm afraid of that happening again. But on the days where I'm fine, I play games like 1 or 2 hours. I watch TV and then I'm done. You know, that's how I was back then. But when I would feel that, you could have a binge.
When I would feel that fear is the moments where I would just be like, okay, no, I'm gonna stay awake. And then it's like, no matter what, I wouldn't go to sleep. You know, because I feared.
I know that I guess what you're trying to say is that also you're trying to very distinctly define a binge against an addiction. If you go on multiple binges, I think that could still mean you have an underlying addiction, and it could be like maybe the most minimal one that there is. But you know, if I've had multiple situations where I felt compelled to play video games, and you know, a lot of the times that has been to a detriment of mine, I would say I'm not currently an addict. I say I'm a potential addict, and I have been addicted. So
no, for sure. I was addicted as a kid too.
I can't say it right now at this moment. I'm a video game addict. I can't say that. I can say I've had an addiction. I'm liable to have addictions to video games in the future again. And I have had instances where it's been damaging to my personal life.
Yeah. The only reason I'm saying make the distinction is because, again, you have to really observe it. Because at the end of the day, if you consider an addiction, you try treating the addiction and your actual problems aren't fixed, then you didn't do anything with your life. Right? Until I went to a psychologist. And I realized that I was using it as a coping mechanism, and I started grabbing all these problems. I would have never figured it out. And
that's true.
I would have continued trying to swallow my emotions with games, and I would have never made it anyway.
Clarify what you said, because literally what you just said was that if you solve your addiction, but you don't solve your problem, you didn't do anything with your life. Which, again, I think that's wrong. If you solve the addiction, that's actually a big step in the right direction.
But one of the things, okay, think about it like solving a disease with another disease, right? That's technically how medicine works, right? You essentially introduce a weaker form of
vaccinations, not medicine.
Okay, you essentially introduce a weaker version of it that's modified to kind of help your body overcome the actual problem, right? So if your addiction is in existence because it's helping you overcome the actual problems that you have that are causing your pain, and then you get rid of that, but you still have your pain. The only thing you did was just remove the one thing that was helping you out, the one crutch, and you're still getting wrecked by everything else.
But the addiction is also defined by it being detrimental to you.
No,
and in the cases that I've named, it has been detrimental to my physical health and my mental health and my relationship.
If you feel that it has, then I understand where you're coming from. But that didn't help the fact that you had all the other 10,000 problems that you still had to go face the next day.
But it made it worse. I now had all those problems, and I had a headache, and I smelled, and and I was sleep deprived, and I also emotionally hurt my partner at the time.
If it hurt you, then yeah, I understand. But in my cases, it hasn't been that. And now then again, I haven't gone to the point of like, shitting on my chair while playing a game ever.
But that doesn't mean that you have to get that point for being addicted.
I have stopped eating before, but then again, think about it. My only options to eat were the 50-cent shitty hamburgers from McDonald's or the shitty chicken that my uncle makes all the time, and I didn't have a choice to go get. Now that I do,
getting up and trying to find some other problem or forcing the issue to be resolved, you chose to play the game. And sure, it was coping with a bad situation.
That hits on the depression thing where you feel helpless, and then you don't want to go deal with the problem, right?
But that's the other crazy thing too, is that addictions could then also be overlaid with multiple other mental issues. So depression leads to feelings of helplessness, which leads to searching to cope, which could lead you to a video game addiction. And these issues don't have to be it's not a black and white thing. You could have a coping mechanism that is an addiction, which is compounded by depression, and that's when it really starts to get, you're getting a formula for something dangerous, right? The ultimate important thing to keep in mind is to recognize when a behavior of yours is being damaging in your personal life.
Yeah.
And to make sure that if you can't do something about it yourself, to get help. Like there's really nothing wrong with like a whole lot of things, as long as you're not hurting it yourself or anybody else. Like playing a video game in itself isn't a bad thing. Being addicted to video games is for multiple reasons. Just for the health aspects of it, like obviously there's been studies that showed that kids who have like video game addictions or even adults, they've been like socially incompetent, or
now I'm gonna give another example of another portion of my family involving the same individuals that were kind of abusive to the same kid. There's another portion of the family there which I don't fraternize with as much, but I still observe from a distance when I do go to visits, right? So essentially my wife's cousin has these two kids, specifically one who's a big gamer, and they buy him like everything. Like the kid has PS5, PSVR, Xbox One X, Xbox Series X. He has everything, right? Like literally they just pay money and they buy him everything, right? So essentially them as parents, they were having a discussion. The kid's addicted because he only acknowledges the world through games, right? And it's true. I do see it. The kid literally acknowledges things through all the gaming. He only recites like emotes on Fortnite, like the dances that you do in Fortnite. He speaks in like the language of like the words like you would see in games and stuff. So that I can understand where the addiction is coming from. And they complain that they have to stop him because he's addicted and there's no way to stop him, and it's literally hurting his mentality and all stuff. I agree. But when I come into the house and I see them all like, yeah, my kid takes a couple cold ones, go to the backyard and completely ignores their kid for the next 10 hours. I'm thinking like, okay, you're saying your kid's addicted, but you're avoiding the issue by not being a parent at all. So a lot of these issues that could happen with addiction with gaming is, again, when it stops being a coping mechanism, it just becomes harmful and detrimental to a person's life. And it also comes from the fact that people have to be there to help these people out, right? And this is just me saying, like, I'm saying it as a, like, make sure you help out the people who have these problems, because again, like, it could hurt the way that your kids, now the cat like wants to do like the meme on Instagram where like the cat's doing like a bunch of music.
The cat, sorry about that, guys. My cat was just literally trying to
use the mouse,
the keyboard and mouse. They say that a lot of the times if a cat really loves their owner, they'll try to like emulate what they see them do. I think he was literally just like, oh, he likes streaming, right? Let me just stream, and he was trying to fiddle with the mouse and stuff. But anyway, so
yeah, all I'm saying is like we have to really get down to it, because at the end of the day, sometimes an addiction can be as easily resolved as getting rid of a stressful situation, and other times an addiction really is an addiction where you have to go to a doctor and get the extra help.
Actually, here's the thing though.
This kid's already getting to that. This kid's already getting to that.
In the situation of that kid though, I mean, obviously, I'm just gonna talk in the theoretical here because I'm not gonna presume that I know anything that's going on in his personal life. But let's say that in this situation, what simply brought it on was parenting errors in the form of just providing to the kid whatever they wanted.
If I go to the house and you're telling me as a parent that your kid's addicted, and your first reaction to dealing with that is going to grab a beer and grabbing a cold one and sitting in the back and ignoring the kid, I'm gonna think that not only you're being a bad parent, but you're also letting it be a problem, and you don't actually care.
Right. Let's say that the issue in this scenario is the parents ignoring the kid, or having what's the word? I'm already starting to get a little tied up, like tongue tied or whatever. The issue here is that you're, help me with that word, man. What is it? It's not ignorance. Huh? No, like in a court of law, you have to prove sometimes not intent. Not competency. Sometimes it's not intent, but rather like, let's say if you do a slip and fall, it's like not liability. It's,
you're losing me, man.
Dude, come on, man. The word, it's a word.
Just trying to explain what you're trying to say.
Negligence.
Okay, negligence.
Okay, so if the parents neglect the kid, obviously the kid would feel like they need to cope, and their coping mechanism might be video games.
Right.
But, you know, again, most addictions are going to be backed by some form of thing that you know that you're going to want to cope from, right? So I mean, I'm not saying negligence isn't something bad or something that you're going to want to cope from, but like, let's say negligence that results in you getting all these things that you want isn't necessarily the worst one, or like the worst thing that could happen to you, even though negligence is horrible. It's bad already. It's bad enough. But you get what I mean? Like, the parents are giving them this environment that he could essentially just do whatever he pleases, and it's still resulting in an addiction, you know? And if you give more parental attention, that might not be enough to snap the addiction, because already you're being raised in it's like a very complicated thing. We can't just water it down and say that if you take one thing away, it's result.
No, of course, I understand. In this case, in this case, there is nothing to take away. The kid's just simply he's learning the world as this.
Yeah, and if you look at it in a
addiction in its purest form, there's nothing around it. He's just simply.
If you look at it in a physiological standpoint too, you have to recognize some of the physiological stuff that happens with addiction as well. Is that if you do something you like, you get a bunch of chemicals in your brain that you really enjoy, like dopamine, serotonin, and stuff like that. And, you know, games stand to profit from you wanting to buy them, from you spending a bunch of time in them, from you wanting to make purchases for them. So they do things that make it more addictive. Like, you know, like Fortnite will use like vibrant colors, great graphics, high frame rates, give you like all these cool skins, and they'll collab with like, you know, Street Fighter, Star Wars, this and that. So that way you're like, oh, I know that character, I want to get them, this and that, you know. These are, anyway, like, it's getting more complicated than I like it to, but essentially, like, you know, at a certain standpoint, you have to recognize that some of these things are even formulated to kind of try to be addictive. And ultimately, where I just kind of want to leave off on that conversation is that addiction doesn't have to always be chronic and like to the most extreme. You could have bouts of it here and there. You could recognize that you also have a big precursor to addiction is having a compulsive personality. So like, let's say, you know, for me, I do have a little bit of a compulsive personality. If I really enjoy something, like when I would work out, I would want to go, you know, twice a day. Remember when I had that phase?
Well, we always did try to do that, but we never fully adopted that.
I did go. There was times where I did go twice a day, but just so you can kind of see my kind of personality. If I want to play fighting games, I'm going to practice this fighting game the whole day. I want to go to the gym, I'm going to try to go twice a day. Oh, I want to work, I'm going to work today 14, 16 hours. You know, a compulsive personality is a precursor to an addiction. And I'm not currently an addict. I think I've had bouts of addiction, and obviously there's different extremes of addiction. You could be lightly addicted, you could be heavily addicted. You know, that's why there's the term heavily addicted to drugs and all that, because there are different degrees of addiction. I think I've had one of the most minor cases. Maybe you disagree. Maybe some people just see it as like, I don't know, like if you game more than 3 to 4 hours to be an addiction. And, you know, psychology, it's still in a very, it's a science, but I think a lot of the times it's very subjective, and you can kind of see that come through.
Of course.
How, you know, one of your therapists tells you do have an addiction, one of your therapists tells you don't. So, I mean, if even the professionals are kind of like, you know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It could go either way, and I understand where you're coming from. I totally agree with what you're saying.
Personally, I recognized it in myself. So I guess the PSA I'm just trying to put out there is, guys, like, you know, there's nothing wrong with coping with a bad situation. And, you know, gaming is amazing. You know, we've made tons of friends gaming. You know, our content is primarily all gaming focused, and we're gamers through and through in every sense of the word. I literally play on every machine possible. I got myself a Switch, PC, Xbox, PS4. I love games, play them all the time. Jordan literally has an amazing library of games. He literally doesn't care. He'll play Hannah Montana on Xbox. He'll play like the weirdest like shovelware on PS3, and he'll play old games 24/7, retro, new, old, whatever. So we like it. You know, the ultimate thing that with anything, you know, goes like with any form of entertainment is just make sure that you're not doing it to an extreme where it's damaging to yourself. If you're ever in a bad situation or you have something going on that, you know, you're feeling you have to cope with, try not to seek an avenue that's going to get you addicted. You know, if you do what you need to cope, try to stay away from bad things like drugs and stuff, obviously. You know, game by all means, but
walk.
Try to solve the problem.
Binge TV shows.
Ask for help.
Yeah.
Look for resources. Get counselors. Call hotlines. Things of that nature. Try not to get addicted to things, and I don't know. Just be, you know, try to be okay and be better and be all right. You know.
Yeah, and also really think about it too, because at the end of the day, also when you realize something, it might stop something. Like I said, like for as long as I can remember, I thought I was addicted to gaming. As soon as I realized that wasn't the issue, it's like the game just kind of I took a thing to the side because it wasn't the main issue, right? A lot of times, maybe your addiction can be resolved as simply as.
Have you ever had an addiction to gaming?
No. I remember like when I first got Oblivion back in 2006. Even though I was a kid, I was younger, so obviously I was a little bit more restless than anything. But I stayed up like 24 hours just playing Oblivion. I remember it. I mean, everybody has a moment where they binge, and just that one high just gets them going the entire day, right? Of course, that's just the miracles of the body, I guess. But what I'm trying to say is essentially like a lot of times, you know, your addiction can be something small and not as powerful as like hooked to a drug or something, and it could be as resolved as simply as understanding why you're doing it in the first place. Like as soon as I understood the issues I was having in gaming, I didn't feel the need to play as much. I still do enjoy gaming because again, it's like everything else is stripped from me. Like movies and TV shows are kind of stripped from me when I was a kid. I wasn't really given the ability to buy as many action figures as the next kid or whatever, or go out as often as the other kids. So gaming was really all I had. But when it came to the point of realizing the difference between me being, you know, addicted and me having issues, all of a sudden, like games weren't doing it for me anymore because I started to realize that, okay, this is not it. So I'm overcoming it. And then all of a sudden it's like games just like can't help me out anymore. And I'm dealing full throttle with my own personal issues, if that makes sense. So all I'm basically saying is, like, aside from all the things we've covered about, is like obviously focus on the distinction, because at the end of the day, there could be an underlying issue that's much worse, and this could just be a symptom that is an addiction, but it is a symptom.
It's a bigger problem.
Sense. Yeah, you want to make sure you're always getting to the root of the problem. If the addiction is gaming, then of course, yeah, you have to fix it. You have to monitor yourself, play less than that. But if the addiction to your gaming is a cause of an even bigger issue, you need to find that bigger issue first, because otherwise you're not going to be able to stop both problems. That
makes a lot of sense too. Yeah. The only other thing I would want to add to that though is that, you know, sometimes it's not as simple as just trying to solve the other issue without solving an addiction.
Of course.
Because the addiction could also then be preventing you from fixing the problem to begin with.
Exactly.
So
it goes
like, let's
both
say
ways.
your problem is that you have some sort of a physical pain from, let's say, being overweight and whatever, and the solution is going to be to diet and exercise. And then your gaming addiction obviously takes up so much time that it doesn't allow you to go ahead and burn off the calories you consume. You're going to have to drop the gaming addiction to then fix your other problem at the same time,
course.
You know?
Yeah. No, it goes both ways. It literally goes both ways, but the point is to at least know it. Because if you can acknowledge it and identify it, it's a thing you were saying where it's like...
to be critical of yourself and just want to self-improve, right?
Just,
be a better version of yourself.
Be honest. But like, you remember when you said like, oh, like people fear the unknown? I remember what my English teacher, 11th grade English teacher once said. It's like people fear something until they name it. And the reason why he was saying that, now I understand it better, is because when you name something, it's because you understand it, you acknowledge it, and now you have information on it. And the more you acknowledge it, the more you're able to pierce through it. So you might fear a ghost, but you find out that you know, that ghost that you might fear a ghost that might haunt you, right? But then you find out that ghost's name is Lila, whatever, and then, you know, her demise was the unfortunate thing of like a serial killer or something. Then you're like, oh, I feel bad. Okay, I understand now.
You can have empathy because you kind of understand.
And that empathy and understanding helps you overcome that fear. In the same way it works with the addiction. Once you realize, okay, this is happening because of this, then you can kind of correlate the two and start working. But you can't do it if you don't know what it is. If you can't see it, that's the problem with addiction. You can't overcome addiction because you can't see it as an addiction. You're seeing it as, oh no, this is just good to me. This is good to me. But you can't see that it's an addiction. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, the first step to realizing that the first step to facing a problem is realizing that you have it, right?
Exactly.
That's actually one of the, you know,
it's one of the first things they tell you anywhere, right?
When you go into AA and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's accepting it.
You have to realize you have a problem for you to be able to fix it. So
that's essentially what I'm saying. It's like, once you have to observe and understand what's going on, because if there's deeper issues that are causing it, and
then you know what's worse about that too is, like, let's say if you're depressed and stuff, because you have a bunch of family issues. You say you have abusive parents, abusive siblings, abusive partners, whatever, and then that's leading you to game to cope, and then you have a video game addiction. Now you have to realize you have two problems. Now you have to realize that you have a gaming addiction. You also have to realize, because some people are abused and they don't even realize it. Now you have to realize you have an abusive partner, you have abusive parents, you have abusive siblings. So it's a lot of realizing and a lot of fixing, and you have to fix both.
That's essentially what went on in my life. You know, I had a lot of people opinionating or putting their ideas on me, pulling me to different types of mentality. That not only it affected the way I interacted with people, it pushed me closer and closer to gaming because it was the only way I could, you know, not have any of those issues, right? And now, like, I'm realizing it more and more every day as I stepped away from it to get a job, and you know, everything was fine. Like, all the things that people told me were wrong with me didn't affect me at all. I put aside the games and I just went to work. And then as soon as all the problems started coming back, you know, I got a wife, and it was kind of hard to start learning to live together. And then, you know, we have disagreements on things because of the different cultures we were born in. And of course, my family returning with their more impulsive ideas and opinions, it brought me back to the original problem I started with, in a worse sense, because not only do I acknowledge it, I feel helpless. So it's like a whole other issue on top of the fact that I may be addicted to this thing. But again, you have to realize what it is. If at the end of the day, you're doing it just because you can and there's nothing affecting you doing it, it's more than likely just an addiction. If it's a problem then where something is causing you to do it, then it's an addiction with an issue that you have to acknowledge. Just what it is.
The other scary thing too, I guess I want to add lastly, is when, you know, people who don't want to acknowledge an addiction say, "Oh, I don't have a problem," or
I'll
they're
whenever
defensive
I want
about it. Yeah,
I can
quit whenever I want. I just don't want to quit.
I can do it tomorrow. I don't need to do it today. You know, yeah. No.
That's a pretty scary thing, because how at that point do you even your brain is telling yourself, "No, I don't have a problem," but you have a problem. Like, what do you even do then? That's like the scary thing about addiction, is that a lot of people that have it don't even realize
that's what I was saying. That's what I was saying too. It's that the first step in AA and all that stuff is admitting you have it. A lot of people, addiction, you're not going to realize it's an addiction until you acknowledge it.
It's also realizing it too. I think a lot of people don't even realize it. Yeah. They just kind of see it as like the state of normal or just normalcy or whatever, and then they just go through the motions, and then they don't even realize that they have an addiction.
Of course, I 100% agree.
In my opinion.
I mean, it kind of reminds me of the story of my barber's mom who had cancer. And essentially, she was like smoking and drinking the entire time because that's the only thing that made her happy. And they essentially told her, "Oh, you have 5 months to live." And she was like, "All right, just give me my smokes and my drinks." It's like, "Oh, but you have cancer, you're gonna die." It's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna die anyways, right? Might as well go out, you know, doing what I love best." My addiction.
That's at the point that you have an addiction where you're not even like acknowledging it or whatever.
Yeah. At that point, she's just like, "Look, I'm gonna die anyways. Just give me what I want. Let me just die in peace."
And you're rationalizing it too.
It is. There's different ways to look at it. There's different terms. That's why it's so gray. Right, there's no black or white. There's different shades, but at the end of the day, anybody who has an addiction needs help, and I totally agree. And I'm saying the things I'm saying today because, again, I don't want to see situations, or I hate to see situations. Hate is a strong word. It makes me sad to see situations like my wife's cousin, the one where he actually was, you know, having visual problems, but they kept abusing him with this addiction that didn't actually exist because he was just.
Well, I guess it also goes. It goes the same to say that obviously an addiction is something that's to be taken extremely seriously.
Yeah.
Kind of like, you know, an accusation of murder or rape or something like that. That's something to be taken extremely seriously. So it's not something that is okay to be thrown around lightly. This is something that when you're serious about it or you're saying it, you need to be sure of it, because the ramifications of saying that someone's a drug addict or something like that, or treating someone as if they have an addiction when they don't, could actually be very bad. Ultimately, you could just end up feeling someone feeling hurt or ostracized, and that's against the whole purpose of trying to help someone with an addiction anyway, you know?
We're not psychologists. I'm not a psychologist. We've been going to psychologists, so we kind of know of the experience of it, and we can talk on it. But essentially,
by the way, has anyone ever been considering therapy? Definitely consider, like, just do it.
Yeah,
like,
just do
I
it.
think there's like programs that even offer it for free. Like, just do your research online and you know, try to find something, because I think it's like one of the best things you can do if you're struggling with mental health.
If you're in a university, you know, reach out to the university, see if you can get some counseling. If you have,
see if maybe there's an option through your job, your work.
Yeah, if you have health insurance, reach out to the health insurance and see what's available.
Even if you don't have a job, or if you're going to school or anything, I think you could actually find free resources online. Just do your research, you know, get an internet connection wherever you can. Go to like a public library or whatever, internet cafe, and just look for it, man, because I think it's a big help. If anyone's ever struggling, talking to somebody about your issues can be a big help.
But the one thing I want to say is, like, we're not any of that, right? But I think personally, with anything, we should consider it the same way a doctor would, right? A doctor doesn't outright look at you and tell you what your problem is, or a psychologist doesn't outright listen to you for 5 minutes and tell you what your problem is. It's over the course of several sessions, tests, exams. Doctors do the MRIs and stuff to ensure that you have this problem or whatever, based off of their observations and their hypothesis. The idea is a hypothesis. If you think somebody's addicted, go through the motions, test it out. See how they react in certain situations. Try and see what it is, because at the end of the day, if you say it's addiction right off the bat and you're hitting it out, you're hitting the wrong thing, you're just gonna ruin that person's life as well as your.
Or you could even drive them to the addiction because of the fact that
you could make them realize it, and then all of a sudden it actually activates. It turns on the switch.
Not that they realize it, but rather that they're like, I don't have an addiction, but then you make it an issue, and now they want to cope because you're making damaging the relationship between you guys.
You're making it realize it exactly. You're training. It's like my psychologist took 2 months of knowing me before she considered saying it. And my personal one took me, took 4 sessions before saying, okay, it's coping mechanism. It's starting to sound more like coping, because of course, like in one section, right, it's the couples therapy. So of course, it's a lot of what my wife says too. And then of course, the psychologist has to see what my wife sees. My wife sees me as addicted. So she has to kind of balance out both viewpoints. But my personal one, I can speak more freely about my personal experiences, and then he sees it differently. So that's why there's a difference in opinion.
What's funny about that too?
They took a while to make that assumption, so everyone else should do the same.
Yeah, but the other thing I was gonna tell you is that it's funny where you bring that up too, because ultimately when you really think about it, it's almost like you can't fully trust either of their opinions.
Yeah, because I'm biased in one.
Someone's taking your word for it, and then in the other case, someone's taking both your words for it. So right, of course. I think the best way always
is obviously if you're
being honest, and then like. If a person could observe you in like your natural state, but the other thing is too is like what a scary thought if it's you fall into the camp of an addict that hasn't acknowledged they have a problem yet, and then you're just straight up telling your therapist you don't have a problem. Can you imagine being in that position?
But that's up to the psychologist.
Well, they would also be trained to recognize it. I'm sure
that's up to them to be able to figure out that just questioning the right things and piercing around. Like I know, for example, to catch people in a lie, you repeat the same question but with different words to kind of flip it. I know jobs do this all the time. It's so annoying that they ask you the same question with different words.
Yeah, like they flip the word backwards. Like 200.
Yeah, it's the same. It's just that's how psychology works. It's to get the mind to think about it. So at the end of the day, what I'm saying is, if a doctor or psychologist would not tell you day one what your problem is, you should not tell anybody day one anything. You have no right to tell them that. It's just how it is. If I met some kid tomorrow and I see him playing games for 5 minutes, I'm not gonna call him addicted. I'm gonna wait a month of knowing him.
A short-sighted opinion to make.
I'm gonna observe them for a while and see how they are, because that kid could be playing for 5 minutes and then 5 minutes later he turns it off and goes out and play basketball, or something else. He's not addicted, But I think that pretty much covers all the stuff. I got a couple things off my chest that I just wanted to blow out there because I'm upset with the way my family acted with those 2 kids. And also the fact that I want people to seek out help the same way that I am because of the pain I feel. Right?
Yep, I totally agree.
It's funny. Just final remark. My family says I play 16 hours. I've already spent 4 hours not playing, and I'm only awake for 14 hours a day. So I don't know how they get that I play 16 hours a day, but it is what it is.
Hey man, maybe you got that schizo.
Oh, maybe I'm playing through my.
I'm just playing. I don't think schizophrenia works that way, but anyway,
maybe.
I guess I'm just going to go ahead and close the episode. Thank you guys so much for watching if you're on YouTube. And also, if you've been listening on Buzzsprout, thank you guys so much for listening. We greatly appreciate it. Thanks to you guys, we finally reached 58 downloads over there on Buzzsprout. So, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, I know a lot of you guys are listening to us on Deezer, so shout out to you guys. Thank you for doing that, and thank you for supporting.
Well, and definitely a shout out to the people overseas too. A lot of our fans are, from the Middle East and Germany and other parts of Europe.
We got that one listener out in Brazil. How you doing, man? Hi. All that good stuff.
Bon dia.
Yeah, honestly, just letting you guys know, if you ever want to tip us directly, you can look in the description. There's a link to our stream elements that you can use to tip us as well. If you'd like to get something in return for your support, consider checking us out at patreon.com/Co-Op Syndicate. We have a bunch of cool stuff there. You can support us at different tiers and get stuff in return. Or if you'd at least just like maybe some clothes or whatever, you could check out our merch store, which is basically SE merchandise /Co-Op Syndicate. thank you guys so much for listening and watching. We'll see you guys next time. I've been your co-host, Michael C. Moore.
I'm your other co-host, Jordan G. Marcos.
And we love you. Peace.
Peace out.